Thank you. Peace be upon you. Welcome to the Grand Quran study. We're in chapter 15, verse 26. Starting off, I think you got overstayed and rejected, the Hijra Valley. Shady, can you mute yourself, please? All right, go ahead, Jamil. It's all yours.
All right. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected, and the human race. We created the human being from aged mud like the potter's clay. As for the jinns, we created them before that from the fire. Your Lord said to the angels, I am creating a human being from aged mud like the potter's clay. Once I perfect him and blow him to him from my spirit, you shall fall prostrate before him. The angels fell prostrate, all of them, except Iblis, Satan. He refused to be with the prostrators. He said, O Iblis, why are you not with the prostrators? He said, I am not to prostrate before a human being whom you created from aged mud like the potter's clay. He said, therefore, you must get out, you are banished. You have incurred my condemnation until the day of judgment. He said, my Lord, respite me until the day they are resurrected. He said, you are respited until the specified day and time. He said, my Lord, since you have willed that I go astray, I will surely entice them on earth. I will send them all astray, except those among your worshippers who are devoted absolutely to you alone. He said, this is a law that is inviolable. You have no power over my servants. You only have power over the strayers who follow you, and hell awaits them all. It will have 7 gates. Each gate will get a specific share of them. As for the righteous, they will enjoy gardens and springs, enter therein peaceful and secure. We remove all jealousy from their hearts. Like one family, they will be on adjacent furnishings. Never will they suffer any fatigue therein. Never will they be evicted therefrom. Inform my servants that I am the forgiver, most merciful, and that my retribution is the most painful retribution. All right, so I read 26 through 50.
Yeah, thank you very much. Chapter 15, verse 26 through 50. Thank you so much, Jamil. Do you have any questions about the verses you read or any comments?
Yeah, so it's saying that so this is actually the verse that are talking about Satan's origin story and how he refused to like prostrate and all that. So there's this whole idea that Satan like could be a god, that he wanted to be a god or something, but where did he how does this verse like where does the idea of Satan's origin story like come from? Is it from like the Bible, the Quran, or
Well, we get snippets of it in the Quran, but yeah, it is reflected in the Bible. If you look in Appendix 7, Rashad gives references from Isaiah, Matthew, and Luke that talks about that.
yeah.
I can put it in the chat quickly.
Okay, so this is like the idea that Satan thought he could become a god.
Yeah. See, okay, yes. Yeah, go ahead.
So here's what's interesting about this. Satan thought he could become a god. Do you know who else thinks they can become gods? Mormons.
Yeah.
So how are their claims any different than Satan's claim? Or are they not different? Yeah, I don't know where the tendency to think that you can be a god comes from, but it sounds like, considering it's exactly what Satan thought, it's probably one of the most blasphemous things you can think of.
All right. Any other comments?
I'll read from Isaiah because I think it's interesting. So this is starting from 14:12. It says, "You have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth. You low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on Mount of Assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. This is where it's basically it's now insinuating what it's going to be like on the day of resurrection. It says, "Those who see you stare at you, they ponder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made kingdoms tremble? The man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities and would not let its captives go home? All the kings of the nations lie in state, each in its own tomb. You are cast out of your tomb like a rejected branch. You are covered with the slain, with those pierced by the sword." Yeah, so it's a interesting narration. Hey, Jamil, do you mind muting if you're?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
appreciate it, brother. Does anyone else have comments about the verses? So it's Surah 15, verse 26 through 50 that we just read.
Yeah, I have a question about the timing. So it seems to say that Adam was created from aged mud first, and then they prostrate. But how do we reconcile that with what we know? Like it seems like uh, h- um, humans were put on Earth at one point. So when did that happen as well? You know what I mean?
Excellent question. What's interesting is there's a subtlety in the Arabic. It for the first verse it says we created the human being. It uses the term insan, from aged clay like the potter's clay. As for the jinns, we created them before that from a blazing fire. And it said, your Lord said to the angels, I'm creating a human being, a basher, from aged mud like the potter's clay. From my understanding, the basher, that element of kind of the human being, was what was created first. But here, right, the jinn happened after the advent of the human being getting that title of insan. And I'll put something in. I believe this happened in when the human being accepted that responsibility and then fell from grace. That's when they basically, got the qualities of an insan. Medina, did you want to make a comment?
Please welcome you all.
Okay, so
I also have a question there. When God said He created us from maybe like the potter's clay, does it mean the clay is not exactly the same with what we have today? Is this clay a special clay or something like that? Or what? What does it mean?
Assalamu alaikum. Potter's clay occurs, notice that it occurs in verse 26, verse 28, and verse 33. It's repeated, created from aged mud like the potter's clay. Potter's clay, for want of a better expression, is the color of a when you plant things, you put them in a pot. That pot is somewhat ruddy in color. It's like Sedona rock. For those of you all are familiar with that type of formation, it's not actually red, but it's kind of like a ruddy red or a pinkish red. Now, one of the reasons why I want to comment on this in terms of like the potter's clay is the fact that, see, the Quran debunks ideas and notions that one complexion is greater than the other or less than the other. For example, you got a lot of people that claim that the first human man and woman were black, or they're this color, and people spin off of that with all kinds of crazy ideas. But potter's clay is like, if you look at a clay pot or you look at clay, natural clay, it's not quote unquote black, white, or anything of this nature. It's potter's clay. In other words, all of the shades of human beings, all of our complexions came forth from that original potter's clay-like complexion, because obviously of geography, environment, all other kinds of influences. These are called, technically, they're called phenotypic, outer characteristics. Also, it is clearly pointing out to us that when the human being was created, we're talking about the physical form in reference to age mud like the potter's clay. And Satan thought he was superior to this creature created out of physical material or matter, or mud, or dust. But I found that this clarifies a lot of the myths and dogmas about complexion and all of this type of stuff that people cling on to in terms of all kinds of racialism. But it's like the Sedona color. Thank you.
I think there's another kind of a metaphor in this example too. Potter's clay, especially when it says like wet, it shows that it's malleable. Its final form is not locked in. And what's interesting is in this history is that he said he didn't want to submit, and God in the Quran says everyone either submits willingly or unwillingly. So his consequence was he was going to go and purify the human being. It sounds like he's just submitting unwillingly. But what happens when you put clay inside fire? Two things. One is it burns the impurities. Two is that it solidifies its shape. And this is what happens in this world, in this domain. Satan comes in his attempt of basically leading us astray. For the believers, it purifies us. But then also, it does lock us in our ways, meaning if we don't grow and develop our souls and we get put into the furnace, we're not going to be able to change our shape afterwards. And I'm talking this like metaphorically, meaning we're going to get locked in our ways. So it's really critical in the sense that we take this last opportunity seriously, but also it's very funny that Satan got duped. He's going to end up in hell, and he's still doing God's work. If does anyone else have a comment? I wanted to emphasize something that's just interesting, and this is kind of the how individuals, Satan's like a representative of this. We trick ourselves not to see the big picture. So when God created Adam, in addition to he says age mud like the potter's clay, he also blew into him from his spirit. What is it that Satan calls out when he says he's not prostrating? He only calls out the piece of the that he's made from clay and I made from fire, right? He lets he casually doesn't address that the human being also has the spirit from God that was blown into him. He only wants to look at the part that he thinks is inferior.
So did the jinn fall before the insan was formed?
Jinn fell before, so yeah, okay. So you have the basher, then you have Satan, basically the jinn, then you have the fall of the insan. Because from my understanding in 3372, when the human being accepted this responsibility, that's when they had the title, but it wasn't kind of in effect until they got duped by Satan. The article I linked to, it's interesting. If you look at all the occurrences of Basher and Insan, typically all the good qualities are associated with Basher, and all the bad qualities are associated with Insan.
So the sequence is, as I understand it, Basher get created, Jinn get created, and then Insan get created. Is that right?
Yeah. The title, like basically that opportunity, because it seems like Insan. This is just the way I understand it. It's something that the human being kind of took on, and I associate it with 3372, where the responsibility of freedom of choice was given to heaven and earth. None of them accepted it, but the human being accepted it. He was transgressing ignorant.
So for verse 1529, it says, "Once I blow into the Basher from my spirit," right? That moment is not when it becomes insane. That's still before that, right?
I believe so. I believe the aspect of insan didn't happen until 3372. That's from my understanding.
Salam alaikum. Remember that we're told that God classified the Basher, and he classified the beings in his presence into three groups. Remember that? I forgot what appendix in the human being. That's when the human being was classified as a human being, alluding to what Brother Dude is saying. Because the human acquired those attributes that make us human, in terms of the doubt. Because we wanted to be wishy-washy. We didn't want to submit totally and absolutely to God's authority and command. And that was part of why we were classified as human beings. That's when the Basher, you see, when God classified us as humans, as this species that was wishy-washy and doubted God's absolute omnipotent authority.
I'll
Praise God.
add something else. Oh, good, brother.
No, please, go ahead.
It's gonna it just on the same vein, but not directly like on this exact point. It's interesting. I was reading Surah 2, verse 30, where it talks about, recall that your Lord said to the angels, I'm placing a representative Khalifa on earth. They said, will you place therein one who will spread evil, therein and shed blood while we sing your praises, glorify you, and uphold your absolute authority? He said, I know you do not know. Interesting. I mean, it's such a obvious point. Maybe I was just slow to the game. But it's interesting. It doesn't say. So it says, "I'm placing a Khalifa on earth," and most people they associate this with Adam. But what's interesting is Adam was not placed on earth; he was placed in paradise. It wasn't until after his fall that he got kind of demoted, sent down to earth. So it shows that this can't be Adam. But Satan, on the other hand, the second he defied God's commandment and stuff, he was exiled from God's kingdom. So he was actually the first to uh,
So if the
basically be.
animals were created, so the animals were created before the Bashar, so that means they already fell before the creation of human?
I don't think it was a fall. Like my take is okay. This is from my understanding when the how do you put it, the idea of Satan entered the collective consciousness, and you have this group of creatures who question God's absolute authority. That it was at that point that you had some that what do you call it? Um, Said, okay, we want to repent. We don't want to go through this. Sorry about that. Yeah, we don't want to go through this trial. And then the human being at that point accepted it, because it shows that there is an earth at when Satan made his claim. There was a day of resurrection, but some of these details weren't fully brought to light at that point.
So like before Satan fell, he still had those influences. Some people already, some animal like souls aligned with him they repented, they were brought on earth, and then Bashar were created, and then Satan gets exposed, and then we get put into, right? Is that the right timeline?
I think so. But it's that aspect of to me, it's okay. At what point did we actually, do we become quote unquote insan? Because every time when it talks about the creation of the human being, it uses the term basher with this one exception. But what's interesting about this one is that it says before that, basically it was the jinns.
It's also possible that the souls that were selected into the Bashar were intended to be insan anyway. So then they fell into insan, but they were already in the Bashar because God already knew that they would become insan, right?
Yeah, God knows. I mean, it's worth researching more.
Okay. Peace and welcome everyone who joined. We were in chapter 15, read verse 26 through 50. Did anyone else have any questions or comments about the verses that were read here?
Sorry. No, man. Peace.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Did you say 26:15 or 15:26?
15, chapter 15, verse 26 through verse 50. Go ahead, brother Ibrahim.
Okay, God bless you all. It's just an observation. When Satan, refused to prostrate before Adam, when he was asked by his creator, and he gave the reason, I just want to believe that the reason he gave was not the actual thing that made him not to prostrate before Adam. I don't know if I'm right, because the other angels were also created from fire, but they obeyed God and prostrated and did what God asked them to do. So I want to believe it is the ego that, made him not to, believe or accept the responsibility that God would put on him to do for the human race. So we can also look at our own selves. When you think you are bigger than anybody, and God is asking you to do something for somebody, and you refuse to do it, you are disrespect for your creator. You are worshiping your ego. You have another God, which is God. So I want us to, look into this and, try to, shape ourselves, shape our beliefs and understanding of what makes us to be arrogant, what makes us to disbelieve in the God that we believe in or that we know is superior over us, is our creator and can punish us for anything that, we would do that is against his command. So this is what I want to put out to all of us, inshallah. Thank you.
Thanks. Next person that was supposed to speak, Saeed, go ahead.
So I had a question. I'm late to the party. Peace be upon you all. Was there any scientific discussion on what potter's clay could refer to? Because it's not as much carbon as it is silica and water-based, right? So the formation element there, I understand, the malleability, the color, and so on. But I have a feeling, obviously, there's scientific elements here that relates to how humans are actually sort of created and evolved. I don't know if anyone knows anything about that.
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if I could answer to your question because it's more axed on scientific segments, but I have a kind of comparative question. I was asking if that could be a kind of alchemical allegorical explanation for our role on Earth, because as I say, as I wrote on the chat, if you take the expression human made with a clay like a potter clay, and you link the fact that only human has gene and gene has made from fire, you see that to make a clay a potter, you need to use fire for potter clay to be a potter, and it's like a kind of explanation, very pictorial explanation, but yeah, it's just an idea I had.
I know that when NASA looks for life on other planets, it looks specifically for clay because what clay is, it's a combination of water and land, like Earth together. So like on Mars, like, oh look, we found clay. That might indicate maybe there's some kind, you know what I mean? So it's possible because like at bottom, what we are is just a mixture of Earth materials and water. So like perhaps that's the scientific correlate.
Yeah, maybe that's it. I mean, I like that analogy with the fire kind of solidifying the malleability of the clay. Another argument, I suppose, for the fact that the jinn is not conditional. Oh yeah, looking for water and earth.
Brother Sahib, when you mentioned silicon, that makes me to think about the computer. When God said in 2782, about Dabbaton, and today the computer communicates with us, we know that the computer is made from the actual material, just like the human beings are made from the earth, dust, right? And today, the human beings are talking. The computer can also talk to you. This is divinely controlled by God because it is what He wanted these creators to speak. So maybe when you said silicon, I think that silicon is what makes the computer, the chip that makes the computer to talk or to communicate with us. And today we also are made of dust, the same as that of computer, and we are communicating. I don't know if that's similar to this. Okay.
No, I think it builds into this image, right? Because if you look at the imagery of or exegesis from Bibles or Torah, they speak of like earthly materials mainly, right? This clay element, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is a Quranic reference. It seems more precise. Like you said, I had never thought about that. Silica could be a reference to the fact that we have computation power. But more, I'm interested in understanding like the foundational materials of humans, right? Where we're all carbon-based, effectively. But there just seems to be some profound nature to saying like age, potter's clay. Like, I don't know what it is, but I was hoping someone had studied into it.
It does remind me of a protein synthesis, but I think that's just me reading into it. That they say, life started within wet mud, water, and that kind of like metaphor for potential proteins.
Sorry,
Yeah, if you like
what was
look
that?
at origin of life research, like they actually begin with clay. Like it's weird. Like they begin with water and inorganic materials that eventually become organic. Organic meaning having carbon. And so aged inorganic material becomes organic according to like origin of life, ideas. That could be another correlate. But like the spiritual aspect of it, I think is also true. I think both things, like it is just a deeper layer of understanding that we are unformed, and on this world we're attached with a fire being to become formed into something. So it's all true. Like I'm not like discounting the spiritual explanation. I think they're both true at the same time.
That mentioning of protein made me think, right, when I looked into the improbability of protein folding and so on, one of the things that it needs is basically a primordial soup, right? It has a very specific time bound to form itself into protein. And the explanation towards the folding, they use entropy as explaining how basically it's like folding a piece of paper and you have to make a bird, right? For it to become a bird, you have to know the sequence of events. And this is more complicated in the folding of a protein. And their explanation for that is that basically it takes the lowest energy state. So it naturally wants to fold into, let's say, the correct path, kind of like how a bubble or a water droplet is spherical, being it's the most conservative energy response. But then maybe it's to do with this primordial soup, because the protein needs an environment, kind of like an embryo, for it to fold. It needs that connection between the amino acids and the peptide bonds. Like it needs basically like, how do I explain it? Kind of like, I guess if it's the elements are earth-like elements, and it's maybe infused in this watery foundation, it has to happen within a specific time frame. So it could be to do with that, the actual formation of the human DNA. I'm not sure.
Assalamu alaikum. I looked up on the internet a definition of clay. It says clay is a soft earthly material that forms over long periods of time when rocks containing feldspar break down to erosion. And it goes on to point out that a concept called chemical weathering, carbon acid, oxygen, the impact of silica, oxygen, metal ions, etc. on rock. I'm simply quoting this and bringing it because several brothers have mentioned this process. It clearly points out that this is where this from aged mud, that in terms of the creation of the earth and the eons, that the material of clay from which the human being was created was a particular form of clay, a material that had aged over a long period of time and was a result of a combination of other factors, of these other factors here that some of you all have alluded to. Exposure to the water, the air, other ions, other acidic compounds, and what have you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody else want to talk about the verses that we read today?
Salam alaikum. I'm back again. I simply had a comment about verse 42, where God says, you have no power, telling Satan, you have no power over my servants. You only have power over the strayers who follow you. And if we look at Surah 14, verse 22, in Surah 14, verse 22, we note that it says, and the devil will say after the judgment has been issued, God has promised you the truthful promise, and I promised you, but I broke my promise. I had no power over you. I simply invited you, and you accepted my invitation. Therefore, do not blame me and blame only yourselves. My complaining cannot help you, nor can your complaining help me. I have disbelieved, and you are idolizing me. The transgressors have incurred a painful retribution. Again, power. God says, you will have no power over my servants. But clearly, Satan is allowed to have power over those who choose him or who believe in his promise. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have comments about these verses? I have a comment about verse 40. Verse 39 says, he said, my Lord, since you willed that I go astray, I will surely entice them on earth. I will send them all astray, except those among your worshipers who are devoted absolutely to you alone. So this reinforces to me that we must fully be devoted to God alone to be saved. Now, this is a statement from Satan, but this particular statement in verse 40 seems truthful to me. I don't see anything wrong with this statement that Satan stated. He's saying that the only ones that aren't going to go astray are the ones devoted to God alone, which is consistent with the theme, teachings, and overall understanding in the Quran. So this is how I understand it, that we need to be devoted to God alone. And then in the next verse, I believe God confirms it. Because God says, this is a law that is inviolable. And then the next verse, God says, you have no power over my servants. You only have power over the strayers who follow you. So this makes it clear that we need to absolutely dedicate ourselves, devote ourselves to God, remember him always, remember God in everything we do, constantly focus on making sure to observe the commandments. Anybody else have comments? Okay, if there's no more comments, we can just read the rest of the chapter, or at least we can get all of story of Lot, Abraham and Lot here. 51 to 84. Do we have a?
I would think just do Abraham. But I wanted to make just a couple comments.
Abraham's 10 verses. Is that it? You want to do
Yeah,
that?
it's all good.
All right.
But just really quick, yeah, it's interesting. It shows in verse 38 that there is it's starting from 35, but that the day of judgment was already established before the fall of Adam. So that's just like an interesting note. And then same thing where we just talked about, says this is a law that is inviolable. That anyone who's devoted to God alone, that Satan has no power over that individual. So anytime that we're suffering hardship and pain, it means that there's something that we have to evaluate regarding our devotion to God alone. The only exception to that rule is the admission test when we're first getting into the religion, where we have to prove that we actually believe in God under all circumstances. And if we do that, then anything beyond that is just for us to be able to refine and identify our deficiencies. God willing, fix them.
I have a comment. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, peace, Sister Yvonne. Go ahead. What's your comment?
Peace upon you. I found it interesting that verse 44, I'm sorry, chapter 15, verse 44, it talks about the 7 gates of hell, if I interpret that correctly. And I found it interesting that there are 7 heavens. So it's like a mirror opposite. Did I interpret that correctly?
I mean,
Yeah.
that's one interpretation. Yeah.
Navid.
There's a stratification between people in heaven and hell. Hey, Wahhabi, we're having a Quran study, so if you want to,
I'm sorry.
wait and stuff.
So what does it mean then? Each gate will get a specific share of them.
You see this in the concept of a stratification. Each person, the degree of closeness to God or distance away from it, is going to be commensurate with their deeds in this life. So those who are among the most righteous, they're going to be the closest, and then those who are the most wicked will be progressively further away. You can think of it in the same way when it discusses the 7 heavens, that if each one of these is just closer to God's physical presence, being in this earthly domain, we're just physically further away from God.
Okay, so like degrees of separation.
That's a good way of putting it.
Thank you.
I have a comment again. God said Satan has no power over his servants. These servants are those who devote themselves absolutely to God alone and worship Him alone. Surah 12, 103, 106. Majority of those who believe cannot do without committing idol worship. We all claim to be believers. Every human on earth claims to be a believer. But what do you believe? What do we believe in? How devoted are we to God? How many, even among the submitters, how many of us are fully devoted to God alone? And how careful are we not to fall among those, these majority of who commit idol worship, who would nullify their beliefs with idol worship? This is something of concern for all of us, because we all see ourselves as devoted worshipers. Is there any way that we are violating God's commandments? Is there any way that we are committing idol worship that could lead us to hell, that could, categorize us among those
Brother
idol
Ibrahim,
worshipers?
your
Yes.
sound is a little muffled.
Oh,
Are you covering your mic?
no, I'm not. But can you hear me now?
I can understand you, but it's just very muffled.
Okay.
You're
But what
asking
I'm
the
saying,
question is if we can be idol worshippers?
no. How careful are we not to be among those categories of people who are idol worshippers, who would fall into idol worship? In Surah 12, 106, 103, 106 says, majority of those who believe, majority of whatever you do, majority would not believe. Majority of those who believe will fall into idol worship. So we are all believers. We always see ourselves as believers. So how careful are we not to fall among those categories of the people that will fall into idol worship? What it means now is that we have to always examine, look inward carefully what we do, what we say, how we treat people, how we worship God. Because worshiping God I believe is vast. So in everything we do as submitters, as believers, we must make sure that we do not fall into idol worship, so that in the end we'll be among the few that will make it by God's grace. That's my contribution, inshallah.
MashaAllah.
Because,
Peace be upon you.
yeah,
Oh, I'm
yeah,
sorry. You were
sorry,
done with it. Please go
sorry.
ahead.
In Surah 34, verse 20, we see God telling us that the devil has succeeded in claiming majority of the people, multitudes of the people. This is another verse that we have to also watch out, observe, look into carefully, so that the devil will not be our Lord. Thank you. Sorry, sister, go ahead.
No worries, brother. Peace be upon you, sisters and brothers. MashaAllah, some great comments, including the one that was just made, and I think it's a great reminder. That's, I think, the one of the biggest, one of the main, if not the main thing we need to be careful about as submitters, to not fall in idol worship. And mashallah, the good reminder to constantly examine ourselves and what we're doing, what we're saying, and make sure that we are aligning with God's system and guidance. May God help us all. It reminded me of this prayer by Abraham, who, Abraham, father of submission, example for us all, that even Abraham prayed to be protected from worshiping idols. It's in Surah 14, verse 35. Recall that Abraham said, "My Lord, make this a peaceful land and protect me and my children from worshiping idols." My Lord, they have misled so many people. As for those who follow me, they belong with me. As for those who disobey me, your forgiver, most merciful. And so this was even something that Abraham was concerned about. So obviously, if Abraham was concerned, we also, all of us as humans, need to be careful about this. Usually away from the chat, but inshallah, I will post those couple of verses in case people want to refer to it. Thanks.
Okay,
Peace
anyone
be
else
upon
like to
you
come?
all.
Yeah, peace be upon you.
I hope you can hear me clearly. I'm good. By God's grace.
Honestly, I wish everyone disinvested for fantastic mic quality on this VC. But I can understand you. Go ahead.
All right, this is cool. So I just wanted to also add on to the points that were made recently about believing in God, right? So what I wanted to highlight was the sermon given by the messenger of the covenant about the devil believes in God. He made it very clear that believing in God, and the Quran also confirms this. It says, believing in God alone is not enough to make paradise. You have to be a submitter, you have to be devoted to God. And the messenger explained as well that your God is not just what you claim to believe in, but whatever occupies your mind the most. So you can claim to believe in God, you can claim to be a submitter, whether you're a Christian submitter, Muslim submitter, whatever the case may be. But if God's not occupying your mind all the time, or at least most of the time, if you are not performing the 5 daily prayers, giving obligatory charity, doing what is expected of you, you believe in God, but God is not your God. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Anybody else?
I do wish to add a thought. This idol worship, I think, while it pertains to us as well, we have to also be careful with the people that we associate. So for an example, if someone invited us to an event and that event is not appropriate for a submitter in some way, then you kind of are endorsing that idol worship. because you are participating as a guest. So I think we need to shield ourselves from such events or movies or things like that that can lead our mind into places that we don't need to be going. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely important to be mindful of activities we participate in. There's a verse in the Quran that actually addresses and mentions this. Chapter 5, verse 2. I think we got verse 10 rejected. It says, "You shall cooperate in matters of righteousness and piety. Do not cooperate in matters that are sinful and evil. Shall observe God. God is strict in enforcing retribution." So we should be conscious of what we engage in for sure. Anyone else?
Just wanted to add on the idolatry section. How's my mic, Naveed?
Oh, it's fantastic. Your mic is great. I wish everyone sounded like you.
This is just the iPhone plug-in mic.
Well,
So
that's what people need to start using.
£15. So yeah, I think one thing I'm starting to realize, especially coming into submissions, is that idolatry. Sorry, he wanted to chime in. Idolatry is quite easy to jump into, right? When you worship God alone, you don't worship your ego. You don't worship your lust, right? There's a verse that says they followed their lust and abandoned the prayer. And the reverse of that verse, seek help through patience and prayer. This is difficult to do except for the humble, I believe. So this is the, I guess the difficulty is trying to find your deficiency, like Brother Peter was saying. If you face some kind of hardship, a little scratch here, some kind of impingement to your progression towards God, there's something else that you value higher than God, right? And this is very easy to fall into. So yeah, that is a form of idol worship, when you value your opinion of the messenger, or when you follow your lust or your earthly desires over God's truth and purification. That was all for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Somebody else trying to speak? Brother Ibrahim, are you trying to speak again?
No, brother. No.
Oh, you're unmuted. We had some noise from you.
Okay. Okay. No, there's no noise, but let me make myself sorry about.
No problem. It's good now. Okay. Well, if there are no further comments, we can read the next 10 verses. They're pretty short.
I'm sorry, please before you.
Yeah, what's up, brother?
Yeah, once again, no, I'd like to just add on to the last statement of today. It's about, I think, another sermon. If you can hear me clearly, I hope that's fine. Another sermon from the Messenger of the Covenant is about priorities. And he concluded with saying that we should put our bodies in service of the soul, not the other way around. So I think that statement alone is enough clarity. So basically, everything we do with our bodies, right, should benefit the soul, at least to the best of our ability. And we should always strive, like as the Quran says, you should strive and steadfastly persevere. We should always strive to be better, always. By the end of the day, the soul is our topmost priority. Then the growth and development of the soul is our topmost priority. So we should put our bodies in service of the soul, not the other way around. Thank you.
I put the verses in the chat. 94, 7, and 8. It says, "Whenever possible, you shall strive, seeking only your Lord." Okay. All right. Do we have a volunteer to read these few verses? 1551 to 60. If not, I can just read them. All right.
Well, I can read, but I just thought maybe somebody who doesn't usually read or speak. Does like Alam, are you available or
Yeah, it's okay. Oh, actually,
Mila?
Brandy's unmuted. Brandy's unmuted. Are you trying to speak, Brandy? Yeah, I'll just do it quickly, God willing. Angels visit Abraham, inform them about Abraham's guests. When they entered his quarters, they said, "Peace." He said, "We are apprehensive about you." They said, "Do not be apprehensive. We have good news for you, an enlightened son." He said, "How can you give me such good news when I am so old? Do you still give me this good news?" They said, "The good news we give you is true. Do not despair." He said, "None despairs of his Lord's mercy except the strayers." He said, "What is your mission, O messengers?" They said, "We are being dispatched to guilty people. As for Lot's family, we will save them all, but not his wife. She is destined to be with the doomed." So this is really interesting. What I like about this is that it informs us that Lot and his family are living at the time of Abraham. And this reinforces the position that Lot is Abraham's nephew. And they're living together. So the angels here are visiting Abraham and letting him know that they are going to destroy the people of Lot. That's a very interesting situation and narration. So for everybody that joined, peace and welcome. God bless you. We read from chapter 15, verse 26 through verse 60. Does anyone have any questions or comments about these verses?
That's something. I think, you can contemplate the devotion and faith of Abraham. Yet something so, in the grand scheme of things, for God, so trivial, granting him a son despite his old age, right? It was one of those things where, for a moment, he was questioning, how is it possible? And I think this is just, it's very telling of just this, the mentality of humans that, for whatever reason, we acknowledge the grandiose nature of God, how he's able to do anything. But then with these, relatively trivial matters, right? They see they're big in our eyes, but in God's perspective, they're trivial matters. I think like an impossibility for God to do. And it's just like sometimes we just have to take a step back and be like, look, God created the heavens, the earth, the universe, everything. For him to do anything of this nature is not the least bit difficult if he wills it.
I have a question. Verse 52, where it says he said, "We are apprehensive about you." What would be the reason for this apprehension?
Yeah, they came suddenly out of nowhere, and they didn't eat food. He offered them food. They didn't eat. They're very strange. These are angels, right? The angels are visiting Abraham. So there's going to be some mannerisms, some signs that are going to be unusual, out of the ordinary with these folks. Does that make sense? So Abraham got scared a little bit.
Yes, that makes sense. Is it possible that there could be a counterpart that would appear to someone? Are there they're like bad angels that could appear to someone?
No, there are no
Okay.
bad angels.
Thank you.
Even though this angel went in the form of human being, imagine you sitting in your house and two hefty men came into your house uninformed. How would you feel? Would you not panic as a human being? It's natural. I think this is what it is. I think who again? That's okay. David. When some of these believers were arguing, they went into his house. He got startled, right? So it's natural that if people just barging into your house uninformed like that, you must be apprehensive. But believers, God will always give us the strength to, withstand whatever pressure until everything gets clear. Thank you.
So based on your comment, sir, you said the angels came in human form. If
Yeah,
angels come in human form, how would we discern that it's an angel?
They would have to inform you. They would have to tell you that they are.
absolutely, brother.
So, for example, these guys, I guess, eventually said they're going to go destroy Lot's, or the people of Lot. And then Gabriel told Mary that he's sent by God to inform her about Jesus. So they would have to give it away somehow.
And I think that, in my understanding, like the apprehension, like the angels, like he sensed that, okay, Masha, like it was said that these are not ordinary people, and he didn't know what they were doing there. Like angels, they can bring good news, which for him they brought good news, but they were also had a mission to go and destroy Lot because they were wicked. Most of them, except Lot's family, except his wife. So so I think that's also not knowing what's going on and what's going to happen um, is my understanding about that. I hope that helps.
Angels, even though they, came in the form of human beings, they are not there for entertainment. So you would not see them laughing, and that was why when they were offered food, their hands could not even touch it. So they are not there for fun. They are there for a mission, to deliver a mission, And so you would not see them laughing or having a kind of fun on themselves. So definitely one should be apprehensive. Things like that. Thank you.
Marshall, I want that was that was well said. They're not there for entertainment. Mashallah. Just reflecting on this passage that we read and what we might be able to benefit from. We spoke a little bit about this, but I just wanted to kind of highlight and add about 42. You have no power over my servants. You only have power over the strayers who follow you. When we idolize or we violate a commandment, let's say, God forbid, we inadvertently idolize someone or something, give power or too much importance to someone or something, thinking someone can harm us or benefit us, for example, we step out of God's protection. It's like we step out of that umbrella of God's protection, so to say, metaphorically, and we fall into Satan's domain, and now we can be afflicted. So that's something to watch for. May God protect us, and so that kind of ties together like the idol worship, being careful about that, and Satan's domain, and the power that is actually in our hands, and we can bring things on to ourselves that we want to be careful that we don't do. We don't cause ourselves suffering, so to say, by idolizing or violating God's commandment, because it would be could be a consequence of what we're doing or saying. May God help us all. Thanks.
Okay. Jamil, are you still here? We're in the second half of the Quran study. We can address your questions.
Yeah,
about the
I'm still
dietary
here.
stuff. Okay, great. We can address that, but before that, we just have to make some announcements. Brother Saeed, did you want to start with the first announcement? Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I don't have anything other than a video of last week's content from the normalization of deviance. It was a good topic, I thought, and I'll post that, God willing, in a few hours. I'm having some technical issues. No
You
new
didn't have
article.
you didn't have an announcement about the prayer time app?
Oh,
or
right.
what?
Sorry, brother. Losing track myself. Yes. So the new app now, or the new command now, protects your privacy, and it also gives you the monthly time for the prayer. So no one can pry into where your location is, not even me. And also, if you put in the month, it will give you the prayer times for that specific month. So you put sun times, your location, and then select the second option that comes down. Put the month, for example, 7 for July, and then it will list you all the times relevant to your location. This can be more precise if you cannot find your city because you're, I don't know, in some remote area. You can use latitude, longitude as well to be exactly precise to your location.
Are you going to put this in is there a link to it you're putting in the chat, brother?
You already put it in the submitter space, and also you
Okay.
just type /sun times.
Okay, thank you.
It's just
Peace
a
be upon
command
everybody.
on the bot. Peace be upon you. Welcome. It's just a command on the bot.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, God bless you. Okay. Other announcements. I wanted to introduce Sister Yvonne. She's a new submitter. Great to have you, Sister Yvonne. I know there's other new submitters here, but Sister Yvonne's here. She joined us from the TikTok live I held a couple weeks ago. And I guess you can take it from there. Yvonne, if you're able to speak, it's very inspirational to all of us. Okay. Maybe she stepped away. Yvonne, do you want to talk?
I'm here. I'm sorry. I had to find my character to open the mic. So as I said, I have been searching and looking at the Quran for some time, but unfortunately I had landed in some wrong groups, some wrong chats, and of course started with the Hadith first, not going to the Quran. And by the grace of God, before I got too far down that rabbit hole, Naveed was hosting a TikTok live, and what caught my attention, am I unmuted? Can you
Yes,
hear me?
you're fine. We're listening to you, but Medina, it sounds like you're unmuted and you're making some noise. Can you please mute yourself? And I'm sorry, like when we're going fast, sometimes I'll just mute people without saying anything because we don't have time for me to ask everyone to mute. Go ahead, Yvonne. We are all listening to you.
Okay. And so what caught my attention was that his background for the chat said Quran versus Hadith. And I was like, what? and whipped my head around and got into the chat. And I had some questions that Navid was very easily answered, and invited me to come to Discord. And the rest is history. Praise God.
God bless you. I put the image in the chat. That's what I use for my lives. But I just wanted to use this opportunity to emphasize the importance of striving on these different platforms and bringing people to submission. I try to do TikTok lives at least a couple times a week, if not more. I should be doing them pretty much daily. God willing, I will soon. But it's very important to support us when we're doing the live, because it's true, I host the live, but others really help out. Brother Justin, Brother Jack, Ophelia helps out. I'm gonna miss names, but a lot of people come in and help. And it's really important because it's public and everyone's coming. People like Sister Yvonne hear the message and can be guided by godly. So it's important to take the initiative and join us in the striving and help us preach the message to bring more people to submission as we are growing. So this is fantastic news. It makes me very happy. The next item I wanted to announce is that after 17 years, we now have a safe space for submitters on Facebook. This is a submitter Facebook group, United Submitters International, which we are now able to have access to. I put an image of it. I'm going to give you a link. I encourage everybody to join the Facebook group. At this point, it's safe to say that we are able to have a good ability on this group. This took a lot of hard work, a lot of effort to get to this point. After 17 years, we were able to establish this. And after Discord, this is the largest collection of submitters internationally. So this is a big moment by God's leave. This is a very, very big moment. And I'm very happy. If you're not already on the Facebook group, you should join. Things were cleaned up. And God willing, if you see anything out of line, please inform us, because we want everyone to be able to benefit and grow their soul. There was a lot of spam, garbage, nonsense, non-submitters were taking over that group, but now it's been all cleaned up and it should be fantastic and beneficial for all. So I encourage everyone to join the group, support your brothers and sisters, and there's a steady flow of new submitters joining from there as well. Encourage them to come here. And I wanted to give a special thanks to Brother Elham for helping facilitate this transition. And I just really appreciate the opportunity to strive in this fashion and unify more submitters. So if you're not a member of the group, I put the link. You can either search on Facebook, type United Submitters International, or you can copy the link that I put in the chat, put a request, and then we can have you accepted in there. Praise be to God. Let's see. Is there any other news? Peter, was there more news I'm forgetting? This has been a great...
I got some content updates. Make it quick.
Sure.
Did an episode regarding basically, you're seeing a lot of these arguments that consist of Christians saying that, they have to accept the New Testament, and the New Testament says that the Quran is wrong. It's a refutation against that. In addition, a whole large list of articles this week. Praise God. I'll just kind of speed through them. So, Khalif on Earth, we talked about this during the study, that it doesn't say a Khalif on Paradise, which would constitute Adam. It says Earth. There's another argument in an article that God does not change. This is against kind of Trinitarians who say that Jesus is God, and then they signify that he was he lived, he died, he lived. Right? It signifies change, but this goes against not only the Quran but also the Bible as well. There's another article kind of looking at all the occurrences of the word Nabi in reference to Muhammad in the Quran to show that these are all temporally bound, meaning that when it says like do not raise your voice above the voice of the prophet, that verse cannot be applied after a prophet passes. Every time in the Quran, without fail, where Muhammad is mentioned as Nabi, it's always in reference to things that were restricted to a time and space. There's also another article regarding the plural use in the Quran. That Rashad states that this is used to signify that God is using, external agents, most often angels. But it looks at all the different examples in the Quran where the plural forms used. It's a kind of an argumentation to show how this signifies participation of other entities with God. Then, yeah, some other stuff. Series of articles. There's about like 5 of them. In addition to that, refuting certain aspects of Trinitarianism and Christian doctrine. But yeah, if you check out the blog, all there.
All right.
Anyone
Do
else
you have any
want?
more
Yeah.
announcements before we continue?
Yeah,
I wanted to.
I have
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So on the Hadith Critic YouTube page, there's an added debate between AAA and this guy named Amar, who's very pro Hadith. It's an entertaining one, so I'll put that in the chat. And then there's another one I did, but this is not a debate. This is about the satanic verses incident. So in the classical exegesis of the Quran by some of like the older Sunni scholars, they have this story that's fabricated, saying that the prophet received verses from Satan, right? And I essentially go through the chains and try to expose why these chains are authentic from their paradigm, even though they reject it, right? And so I got a lot of, I guess, results from this. I think this is the most viewed video on the channel. So if you want to check it out, I put it in the chat.
Praise God. God bless you. I appreciate that. And then today's Sunday. So next Sunday it'll be business as usual, but the following week, on Friday, July 2nd, some of us will be at the conference, Submitters Conference in Tucson. If you're coming, I look forward to seeing you there. If you had not come, if you are still deciding on coming or need information, contact us so we can share that with you. And I have great news. The cards I was talking about have been printed by God's leave. So it's going to be wonderful. Last I confirmed, over 20 people are coming from Discord, maybe 30. So it's really exciting to meet everyone and move this process forward. I was going to make another announcement, but I forgot. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. We can go back to Jamil. Jamil, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, we can go back to your question. So you asked a question about chapter 16, verse 115.
Yeah, the one that says that food dedicated to other than God is
Yeah,
prohibited.
let's read
Well,
it.
I actually there's something I wanted to clarify on that. So there are other verses that say like animals dedicated to other than God, but chapter 16 verse 115 just says food dedicated to other than God.
Yeah, I wanted to read it for everyone.
Yeah.
See those God forsaken and rejected. So the subtitle says only 4 foods prohibited. It says he only prohibits for you dead animals, blood, the meat of pigs, and food which is dedicated to other than God. If one is forced to eat these without being deliberate or malicious, then God is forgiver, most merciful. So the first thing that comes to mind is chapter 6, verse 145. This verse has a subtitle, The Only Dietary Prohibitions. The verse says, say, so it's a command to Prophet Muhammad to say this. I do not find in the revelations given to me any food that is prohibited for any eater except 1, carrion, 2, running blood, 3, the meat of pigs, for it is contaminated, and 4, the meat of animals blasphemously dedicated to other than God. If one is forced to eat these without being deliberate or malicious, then your Lord is forgiver and most merciful. Now, one thing I found was really interesting. Right away, the subtitle says only dietary prohibitions. The next point is that this is a command. This is one of the last, if you look at the order of revelations, this is one of the last verses revealed in Mecca when the prophet was staying in Mecca before going to Medina. So that's really interesting. The next point is that the prophet is saying, I do not find in the revelations given to me. So that's everything, Quran and non-Quran, everything the messenger receives is included here. He says, I do not find the revelations given to me any food. So that includes all kinds of foods. So he's told to say that out of all the possible foods, there are only 4 that are prohibited. The first one is carrion. And if you compare it to the other verse, well, the next point is actually, before I say that, is what's interesting also is that it's numbered. It's the only verse where it's numbered, the categories. The first one is carrion. Now, carrion is specific to kind of like just animals that kind of died of themselves and just laying there. But if you look at 16:115, it doesn't specify that. It just says dead animals. So that's a more specific example of what a dead animal is, because we don't eat live animals. All animals we eat are dead. So it's telling us what carrion is more specific. Then the next one is blood. But we know that it says blood, but 6145 says running blood. And the messenger clarifies that not all blood is prohibited. It's blood that is running. So running blood is what is prohibited. Blood trapped within the meat is not prohibited. So all blood would not be prohibited, just like all food, all dead animals would not be prohibited. And I'm putting the footnote of 6145 in the chat. It says only 4 kinds of animal products are prohibited: animals that die of themselves, running blood, not trapped within the meat of pigs, and animals dedicated to other than their creator. Verse 146 informs us that such prohibitions are very specific. God prohibits either the meat or the fat, or both if he wills. The third category is the meat of pigs, lahman khanziran. That's the Arabic expression, but the only difference here is that 145 gives a reasoning. It says, sorry, I just got a notification that Joe Biden dropped out of the race. Okay, I got distracted. All right. It says that the meat of pigs is contaminated. So 6145 gives the reason for why meat of pigs is prohibited. And then the fourth category, it says food dedicated to other than God. And then 6145 tells us the meat of animals dedicated to other God. The footnote explains it's animals like dedicated other than God. The Arabic is uhilla la ghayra Allahi, which means the animal slaughtered to other than God. And this is clarified by the messenger in one of the audios. The messenger says that dedication, in the context of food, dedication means sacrifice. So there's 2 things, right? One is dedication, one is mentioning. Mentioning is anything you consume, you have to say Bismillah in the name of God. So if you want to eat an apple, you say Bismillah. You want to eat a banana, you say Bismillah. You want to eat rice, you say Bismillah. Drink water, Bismillah. Anything you consume, you have to say in the name of God. That's
No, it's
mentioning.
not only to meat in that specific case.
For eating or consuming, you have to say Bismillah for everything. But
I
that's
think what
mentioning.
the issue with the food dedicated to other than God, if you're at like a party or a social gathering and someone else dedicates like an entire feast to other than
Yeah,
God.
so I'm explaining that that's not a thing. So the messenger explains that dedication means sacrifice. So dedication happens at time of sacrifice. So when you're killing the animal, you take the life of the animal in the name of Jesus. In the name of Muhammad, I slaughter this animal. That's dedication. Dedication is pinpointed at the time of slaughter.
I
So
feel
if I'm
like this
eating
is what traditional Muslims use to determine what foods are quote unquote halal certified.
well, they have a specific slaughter method that qualifies it for halal certified. They have to cut the neck halfway open, and then the animal's still alive. They drain the blood. That has a whole process, but that's a separate issue. But we're talking about slaughtering in the name of other than God. That's what's prohibited. Right? So if you're eating your meal and someone comes over to your table and says, "Hey, you know this meal you're eating? This meal is actually dedicated to Jesus." They can't do that because that's outside of the scope of the dedication process. You can't just jump over and dedicate someone's food. Dedication happens once at time of slaughter, and that's it. Finished.
Okay. Yeah, so that's when
And
it
the
happens. So
yes,
the
and the
food
messenger
dedicated to other
clarifies
than
this.
God is specifically for like when you're saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim before you eat.
That's not dedicating. That's just mentioning God's name before you eat.
Okay.
So you have to mention God's name before you eat anything. That's very
Nabi,
important. Yeah, what's
I,
your yeah,
I
go
mean,
ahead.
you're trying to use like the order of revelation to like say that one verse both encompasses the other, but wouldn't that lead to like specific Quranic verses getting invalidated and stuff? And that's not
No,
what we believe in as submitters.
no. So the Arabic is the same. For the fourth category, the Arabic is the same. It's
Oh, what
Ohella
is it in
laqayr
Arabic?
Allahi. Yeah, Ohella laqayr Allahi means that which is slaughtered to other than God.
So it's
And
just an English translation thing that's causing the difference.
exactly. And that's why the messenger's clarification resolves this dispute. So he explains the dedication means sacrifice. So it doesn't even matter what word is used there, food or animal or whatever. Messenger says dedication of food is the slaughter of the animal. And we have a lot of evidence for this. And I think Peter gave you the Git books. I can give you the Quran Talk blog is very comprehensive on this. It compiled a lot of evidence.
Yeah, I transferred all the articles to the Git book, so it's just in one.
That's awesome. So yeah, rest assured, this is a very well studied topic. I just put it in the chat. Jamil, do you see what I just put over there? But you should definitely use the Git books too. I just wanted to pinpoint this separately also.
Peace be upon you, brothers and sisters. So I also just want to share my understanding on this topic, and I don't want to insist on my understanding. I just want to be able to share it, and thank God for being able to discuss, inshallah, peacefully, amicably, the different understandings that we may have, and each person can reflect for themselves. So my understanding is for any topic, we need to look at all the verses to come to the right understanding. There may be different aspects of a topic that are covered in different verses, and we need to consider all of them. So in terms of this topic, that, one example of dedication could be the animals that are dedicated in that way that was spoken about. However, 16:115, that one is it is translated by Dr. Khalifa as food. And when one looks at, I think when we looked at the Arabic, it says that, and it goes back to the previous verse that's talking about food. Let me just bring up the, yeah, so if we look at 16:114, it says, therefore you shall eat from God's provisions everything that is lawful and good, and be appreciative of God's blessings if you do worship him alone. And then 6:115, he only prohibits for you dead animals, blood, the meat of pigs, and food which is dedicated to other than God. So that which is dedicated to other than God, which goes back to 114, that's talking about God's provision. So it's a general thing, and Dr. Khalif has translated it as food. Actually, in the Gold translation, the original Gold translation, I'm looking at it now. In there, he has put animals dedicated to other than God, but then he revised it to make it food. So that's why that's another thing that we need to be careful about these audios and videos is that
Sorry.
just like the previous translations are obsolete,
Hey,
the previous
Fari, you
versions.
gotta be careful. Yeah, you gotta be
Can I
careful
just
to not warp. Yeah, you said a lot.
can I just finish? I'm almost done. Can I have like
Yeah, but
okay, thank you, brother.
yeah, if you
But
wrap it
like,
up, I have questions for you for basically about this.
Can I just finish my comment? Yeah, so just like previous, if we look at previous edits, like previous versions that are now obsolete, we need to go with the latest version of the translation. There's also audios and videos that go along with those previous versions of the translations that are obsolete. So we need to be very careful. And like I said, he revised it from animals dedicated to other than God to food dedicated to other than God. Yeah, so if there's any other input, I can listen. I'm not interested in a debate per se. So,
yeah,
and
so
I
Fari,
don't
you
want to,
can't
I
come
don't want to
here. You can't
insist.
come here. Fari, you
I
can't
don't
come
want
here, preach falsehood, and then refuse to engage and answer
to.
questions.
No. I'm
You're
not saying that.
confusing people. You're spreading falsehood. You spread blasphemies. You
No,
don't
I'm just.
accept the paradigm. You don't accept obeying the messenger. You don't accept
Let me
adhering to
No, those things are not
God's
true.
system. It's
I'm
absolutely
just,
true.
I'm
All right, well
just.
then engage with
let me
Peter. Peter's Peter
Let
just
me.
wants to
let
say
me
a
make
few things.
sorry, let me
Let
make
me
my comment. We listened to you for the last 5 minutes. I want to make my comment. Okay.
Sure.
So
I just want to just say
first
one
off,
more thing, brother. Can I just say
hey
one more
Ferry,
thing?
why is
Please,
it that
Fari,
when
just stop
Ferry,
talking.
like I don't understand. You expect people to basically, not talk when you're talking, but the second I start talking, you won't grant me the same courtesy.
No, I was still talking,
So
brother. Can I
again,
just
it says
finish? Can I just finish?
you were
Just
finished.
one more sentence.
Like, no, Ferry, you were finished. Naveed started talking, and now I'm
No.
talking.
I wasn't.
So
No,
if
I
you want
wasn't
to
finished.
talk,
I wasn't finished. I was interrupted multiple times. I just want to say that I don't want to insist on my understanding. Therefore, that's why I don't
As
want.
far, are you
Any,
willing to be are you willing to be refuted? Or
yeah,
are
yeah.
you
I mean,
gonna
anyone can.
worship your ego? Okay, then listen
No.
carefully.
But
Listen
can I?
carefully to what Peter's about to say.
Okay.
Don't
Okay.
struggle so much.
I just want to say
Yeah,
that
just
I
thank
don't.
you. Thank you.
If I don't continue to, if I don't make any other comments, it doesn't mean that I agree. Like if I don't continue
Yeah.
to debate, I mean, I'm not interested in a debate. I just want to express my understanding. If I
W-
don't respond or make further comments, it doesn't mean that I agree. It just, I don't want to
Why
insist on my
got it.
understanding.
why aren't you
That's
Sorry,
all.
we
yeah.
got it.
That's all.
Okay, thank you. All right. So the first point is with Fari's paradigm, it creates a fundamental contradiction. She's taking basically a false extrapolation from 16:115 and making a broad sweeping claim that doesn't match the messenger's teachings, the appendix, the footnotes, or any of the other verses of the Quran. Very simply, it says he only prohibits for you if you're reading 16:115, right? Notice in this verse it says dead animals. Mary does not believe all dead animals are prohibited. She reverts back to 6145, where it says basically specifically carry on. It says blood. Okay, she doesn't think all blood is prohibited. She
No,
reverts
that's not
back to
true.
6145. I'm not done. Right? She reverts back to 6145 to running blood. Same thing for meat of pigs. And then the last one, it says food which is dedicated to other than God. Rather than reverting back to basically looking at the other verses to say, okay, does her interpretation create a contradiction? She says, no, that one encompasses all foods. right? So she's not using the same standard in regards to the first and second dietary prohibition. Now, you could look at every single thing that the messenger taught in the appendix, in the footnotes, in the subtitles, in the videos. It's always the same thing. He clarifies this explicitly, that when it comes to the fourth dietary prohibition, it's animals sacrificed to other than God. Right? We do not have a single instance of him prohibiting, fruits, vegetables, apples, oranges. And if you ask people like Ferry, what's the process of dedication? They have no consistent answer to that. So for that reason, I mean, look, she's just speculating as far as what she thinks, and again, using an inconsistent approach.
Yeah,
Brother dude, so what I want to say is that yeah, I was a bit lemon shaitan regime. I agree, Sister Yvonne. I'm usually away from the chat, but happened to see that. Yeah, let's all take a moment and seek refuge in God from saying the rejected. It's not that like I said, we need to look at all the verses and put it all together. And what I recommend that we do is talk about the topic and not about people and what they're doing. Not attack people, not put down people. Let's just talk about the topic. The truth stands for itself. God is the one who guides. He's a teacher of the Quran. I agree that we need to put all the verses together to look at it, to understand the topic. Dedication, there's also the form of somebody, like they throw, like in Persian culture, sometimes people will throw a sofre, like they'll have a gathering where they provide food, they invite people. That can be dedicated to God, but it can also be dedicated to an idol in the
so
sense that they're providing that food in
yeah, thank you.
asking
I just have a
for.
question for you. So
Oh,
do you
okay. I was
believe,
disrupted
do
again.
you
So then,
believe,
okay, I'm not going to engage if I cannot make my
we
comment.
get it. You're saying
Not,
there's different forms
that's
of
not it.
dedication from your paradigm. We
But
understand.
I need to be able to finish my comments. Otherwise, I'm not going to engage. It's not going to be fair if somebody's not allowed to express their understanding. So they may be praying for something to that idol, and then so they're seeking something from that idol, and then they're dedicating that food in order to get their prayers answered or to get something. So that can be a form of dedication. It can go with any food, and we've seen this. Some of us may have heard, or some of us may even experienced this happening. So yeah, I just wanted to.
Thanks. I had a question. So do you believe that 16:115 abrogates 6:145?
No, it's not about, like it said, the brother said earlier, all the verses of the Quran are valid. We need to just look at all of them and put them all together in order to have the
Yes.
correct
Yeah, but
understanding.
okay. So
So,
can I clarify my question? So 6:145 mentions all food and then says it's only animal products. And you're saying 16:115 came later and expanded it to all food. So that would be abrogation, because 6:145 is saying in the entirety of the revelations, out of all the possible foods, only for animal products are prohibited. You're saying that existed, and then 16:115 showed up and abrogated that and broke the limitation on animal products and expanded it to all foods. Do you understand how that's abrogation?
no, I'm not saying it's abrogating. I think like 6145 is addressing kind of like the animal.
But it says
Um,
all foods. It says all foods in it. Or I'm sorry, it says any food.
it says any food,
It says
but
any food.
we need to look at the context may be
Yeah,
animal
if you
products
read,
there.
it's not. No, it's not. The context is not animal products. Is if you look at 2 verses earlier, it's talking about pomegranates. Right? So if you look at just 2 verses earlier or 3 verses earlier, it's talking about crops, pomegranates, I believe olives. It's talking about plenty non-animal products. So the context of 6145 is not limited to animal products. It mentions non-animal products. And then Prophet Muhammad responds to them, prohibiting crops, which are non-animal products, and tells them only 4 animal products are prohibited out of any food. So the context is all foods. Prophet says out of all the foods, there's only 4 animal products that are prohibited and nothing else. And so then for 16:115 to break that and say, no, it's not limited to animal products. All foods can be prohibited. That's an abrogation. But we don't believe in abrogation. The Sunnis believe in abrogation of the Quran. They believe verses abrogate each other. We don't. We believe that the verses can only work together. They cannot abrogate each other. So 16:115 must be understood in the context of 6:145. That's why when it says blood, it doesn't mean all blood. We refer back to 6:145 and see that it means running blood. That's why when the messenger translates as food, we know it's not all food because the messenger, 6:145, he translates as animals, right? So you have to look at things in context. You can't create a contradiction between the verses.
No,
Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I agree that
Yeah, but your paradigm creates a contradiction because 6:145 is subtitled the only dietary prohibitions, right? Meaning the only foods that are not dietary means anything in your diet, anything you eat or drink. Right? So if the only dietary prohibitions are only animal products in 6:145, and then in 16:115 is expanded to all foods, this is a contradiction, this is an abrogation. So we cannot accept this paradigm. It doesn't work.
So again, brother, I don't want to insist, I just want to share. So if we
I know,
go
but you need to address the points.
Okay, so let me make a comment just to share kind of, again, I don't want to repeat, I just, if there's other points or if I need to address something, I will. So if we look at 143 and 144, those are talking about animals. So 143, 8 kinds of livestock, regarding the 2 kinds of sheep, 2 kinds of goat. Is it 2 males that he prohibited or 2 females, or the contents of the wombs of the 2 females? Tell me what you know if you're truthful regarding 2 kinds of camels and then 2 kinds of cattle. Again, it's talking about animals, and then 145, and then
But that's not when with all due respect,
Brother,
that's not when
can I finish my comment?
can I just correct you real quick? You just misstated something. The conversation starts from.
Can I finish my comment?
Do you not want to be corrected?
Moderate. I want to finish my comment, and then afterwards anyone's free to make any comments. So 145, the footnote says only 4 kinds of animal products are prohibited. So it's talking about animals, and then the verse after is again talking about animals. For those who are Jewish, we prohibited animals with undivided hoofs, etc. So this is my understanding that this is, and we don't want to get caught up in semantics, but it is also noteworthy that in the Gold Quran, Dr. Khalifa had it as animals, and then
says any food. It doesn't say any animal product, right? In the verse itself, right? It says any food. Why do you not acknowledge that?
She won't acknowledge the verse as any food.
The verse itself clearly says that there is, out of all the food that people eat, the only ones that are prohibited are these 4. Right? The footnote emphasizes that it's only animal products that are prohibited. So where does this conclusion that no, this includes pickles and oranges and grains and stuff come from? Because the verse is very clear. It says, "Out of I have not received any revelation given to me for anyone who eats any food."
I think the context is animals, because the previous verses are talking about animals, and I think it's noteworthy that in
But you can't. But Fari, you can't impose your understanding on a verse.
No, I'm not. I'm just sharing. Anyone can decide for themselves. I'm just sharing.
I know, but even what you're sharing is not consistent, and also you did an omission. The conversation starts even earlier. I would say at a minimum, 6:136 is the discussion on dietary law. So these idol worshippers are putting animals and crops and livestock, separating them and saying that they're set aside for our idols. And Prophet Muhammad says no. So the context is clearly non-animal products. And 614, and they continue to talk about this. This is the back and forth discussion between the idol worshippers and Muhammad. And 6141, separately, God mentions olives, pomegranates, different trees, fruit, different fruits, right? And so you arbitrarily picked from 142 and refused to go earlier than that. And in addition to this, the subtitle says the only dietary prohibitions means that it's not saying the only animal prohibitions or the only meat prohibitions. This is the only dietary prohibitions. And the verse itself says any food. But you want to refuse that and say any food it just means animal food.
No, brother, I'm just sharing my
I know,
understanding.
but you're not.
It's helpful.
I understand, but you're not. I think Brother Elham is trying to speak. Go ahead, Brother Elham.
Excuse me, Assalamu alaikum. In whole Quran, the disbelievers only they prohibit the plants, the other than animal products. The disbelievers only prohibit themselves other than animal products. In whole Quran, we see the believers should. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you, brother. Yeah, please finish your comment. Yes, we can hear you.
Believers should have to obey the verses. All verses in Quran, it's mentioned only the animal products will be prohibited. And then 16:115 and 6:145 is combined. We have to the both are combination verses. One is supported another, and all even one verse there is no in plants or sorry plant other than animal products is prohibited. But the disbelievers only they mentioned in Quran, the disbelievers only they prohibited themselves the other than the plant items. What this call another of the animal products. Thank you.
I just wanted to add, I think it is noteworthy that Dr. Khalifa changed it from animals. In 16:115, he changed it from animals dedicated to other than God to food dedicated to other than God. And in the footnote, he does specify that these are animal products that are being referred to here. But brothers and sisters, I wanted to share another example. Just
No. Wait. Fair. You can't just like monopolize. You have to kind of give time. So look.
No,
This whole argument of the change, the aspect of the change is pure conjecture and speculation because you're saying that he theologically changed his position. The reality is he never changed the appendix on this matter. It's always been the same. Right. So if he had a fundamental difference in take that it caused him to say, look, this is it's actually all food. It's not limited to only animal products. You can't make that assumption based on conjecture. Because at that point, then you're treating it as if it's scripture in the sense of like, it's divine words that came from God. He taught that the dietary prohibitions was only animal products in every single one of his teachings throughout his entire messengership. To extrapolate that, because he made a change in, a verse translation, therefore he changed his entire understanding in theology, is just high level of speculation.
This is the thing that God tells us.
I would love if you actually address rather than going off conjecture, address the points that are being made. Why is it that when it comes to 16:115, the first two dietary prohibitions, you understand that 16:115 is not what you're going to go with. But then when it comes to the fourth dietary prohibition, you pivot and say, no. This basically overrides 6:145, 2:172, Surah 5, verse 3, and all the footnotes, and all the appendices, and all the teachings. I would love if you actually address these points.
Yeah, it's arbitrary. Fari, can you explain why you don't accept all blood as prohibited?
So like I said, we need to look at all the verses on a topic.
But you don't do that for the fourth.
All together. And so
Yeah,
for
but you
instance,
don't
like
do
dead
that.
animals, like we need to have the correct understanding using the whole Quran. So the we can look at I mean, not only we can, but it's good to look at different verses to come to the right conclusion. The example
But
that
look,
I
you're
wanted
the only
to,
ones
okay,
who
I'm
are
being
providing.
interrupted
You're the
again.
only
I
ones who
just
are providing other verses. Like that's the whole point. You've yet to provide another verse to back this claim. All
okay,
you
so
have, the only
I
thing
want
you
to
brought up
provide
was the
other
fact that you said,
examples.
look, you changed the translation. So can you actually provide scriptural backing to this claim?
Okay, so brother, I'm gonna give another example. Surah 39, verse 53. God's beautiful verse, God's infinite mercy. Proclaim, O my servants who exceeded the limits, never despair of God's mercy, for God forgives all sins. He's the forgiver, most merciful. So someone can take that as all sins, God's going to forgive no matter what. But we have to look at other verses to know that idol worship, if maintained until death, is not forgivable. So that does not abrogate this verse. These verses do not abrogate each other. It's just they're different. God is covering different aspects of this topic of forgiveness in different verses. We need to put them all together, keep them all in mind to understand this
Yeah,
topic.
yeah.
So,
Okay,
because
the
somebody
challenge
may
here is
say
again,
that
this is
the
purely
somebody,
Fari.
can I
You
just
can't
finish
just
this?
filibuster. No. You can't just filibuster. You made your point. You brought your verse. I'm going to give a rebuttal to this. Okay, two things. One is again, this is just pure conjecture. You haven't brought a verse to support your position that it's all foods. Okay, regarding this, the fundamental difference between this verse and 6145 is that it uses the double negation. This eliminates the possibility of any other stipulation beyond what's stated in 6145, because it reads, I do not find in the revelations given to me any food prohibited for anyone who eats food, right? That encompasses everything. This is not something that's like an open-ended statement. This is the same way that, say, for instance, the Shahada is declared that you cannot put another God beside God. Right? It eliminates that possibility. It's the same thing with 6145. So can you please address why is it that you don't accept that it's all blood or all dead animals, but then when it comes to the fourth dietary prohibition, you pivot and you go with basically the more general that it's all food. So why do you do it in regards to, you don't do that in regards to the first two prohibitions, but you do it for the fourth?
What I'm saying, brother, is that we need to look at, and this other example that I gave about 39 is that because on the surface it may look like these verses, and it's on other topics too, it may look like verses are contradicting each other, but they're not contradicting, they're not abrogating. It just means that we need to consider all the verses on a topic to understand that topic correctly. But again, brothers and sisters, I don't want to insist on my
But Fari,
I don't
but
want to.
Fari,
No, can I
but
just finish?
Fari,
I don't want to
yeah,
insist
I
on
just
my
want to address that point real
understanding.
quick. Fari,
Can
are
I
you
just finish
saying
my comment? I
you
don't
made?
want to
I just
insist on
want
my
to.
understanding,
Yeah,
and
we
I
get
just want
that.
to
You don't need
share.
to give
And
this.
but the
You don't
other
need to give this disclaimer. You don't need to give
and
the
the,
disclaimer.
but the
We
other thing I
understand.
wanted to say is I wanted to encourage everyone to talk to other submitters outside of our community in Discord. Talk to other submitters, especially contemporaries of Dr. Khalifa who are
Yeah,
still on the path of
that's
worshiping
horrible.
God
That's
alone.
horrible. We don't believe in this
No, I'm
concept
just
of
saying.
Sahaba having
No,
superior
no,
understandings.
no. What I'm saying is God says to consult, right? And
Yeah,
to study the
we have
Quran
60
with each other.
submitters here. Yeah, we have
Yeah,
60
but
submitters
that
here.
doesn't mean that one with God is the majority. Doesn't mean that. So I
No,
just encourage
we're not a
everyone
majority.
to study.
Can I just ask
I
a
just
specific
encourage.
question? Like I heard a little bit just now, you
I,
said
um,
abrogation.
no, I'm
I,
Did
not saying.
did you
I
say
wanted to ask
abrogation?
the question. Wait. Before we get to that, I just wanted to ask this question. Are you saying that when God commanded Prophet Muhammad to recite 6145, God gave him incomplete dietary prohibitions? Meaning that it was meant to be completed later. He gave dietary prohibitions, but they were not complete at that moment. Is this what you're saying?
I mean, God says to read the Quran from cover to cover.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying when the prophet said this, the first time the prophet recited 6145 for the people, I believe this is a Meccan verse. All the other ones are Medinan verses. So as a Meccan verse, when he recited this in Mecca, and God said, proclaim this to the people, say, I do not find in the revelations given to me any food prohibited for any eater except these 4 animal products. Are you saying that that was an incomplete dietary prohibition for the people of Mecca when he recited that?
All I'm saying is we need to
It's a
look at.
sorry, it's a yes or
Okay,
no.
I'm not even able to speak. If I'm
It's
not able to
yeah,
speak,
it's a
then
no, you are, but it's a really simple question.
I can't even get a whole sentence out before I'm interrupted. How am I
I
able?
know, but the way you answer that question is saying yes because or no because.
No, I'm gonna discuss like there's freedom of expression, and we cannot coerce people. We cannot force people to engage in a particular way.
I'm just asking you a question. If you can answer it, great. If you refuse to engage, then we can just move to somebody else. I can ask Saeed the same question. I can ask someone else the same question.
Okay,
I'm asking a very
just gonna-
straightforward, simple question. I'm saying when the prophet received this verse and was ordered by God to state this to the people, do we believe that the prophet issued incomplete dietary prohibitions at that moment? That's the question.
God clarifies things for us. Like God tells us to read from the Quran to God tells us to read the
Yeah,
Quran.
they didn't have Fari, I'm solving that for you. They didn't have the whole Quran. They said 13 more years to go. So they didn't have the whole Quran in that moment. So in that moment, are you saying that God gave Muhammad incomplete dietary prohibitions in the verse that was revealed?
What I'm saying is we need to go with what we have now. Like the God knows.
Yeah, but you're not answering my question.
Okay,
We have to look at.
Brother,
Maybe I can look.
Am I allowed to make a comment as I
Yes,
I have
but
the freedom to make a
because
comment as I see fit?
Fari, I use my turn to ask a question. If you don't want to answer it, I can ask someone else. You're not forced to answer. So let me ask Saeed this question. Saeed, brother, if you're here, peace be upon you, welcome.
Peace.
Is it logical to say that God gave the prophet incomplete dietary prohibitions to proclaim to the people in Mecca?
No, I would say no.
Why not?
For me, God doesn't give incomplete messages because his word is perfect and complete. I think people seem to misunderstand this concept of circumscription, right? And Brother Du just posted the sequence of Revelation 6 came first. And what circumscription is, and it's used in law frequently, which is, for example, I will say, do not hurt people or do not break this terms and agreement. Then I go in to specify what the terms and agreements are. So the more specific a term is, the more powerful it is in the context of what is adhered to, right? And then you may see terms like this is not limited to, or this is not an exhaustive list or whatever. When the verse clearly states, right, I do not find, and also the messenger of God says this is the only dietary prohibition, this is the more specific statement. Therefore, a general statement outside of it does not abrogate said statement. It reinforces said statement. For example, I can say my chicken or my steak is a form of meat. And then I can make a more general statement. It's also a form of food, right? This is a more general countenance or grouping of that food mechanism. But the point here is that when it was revealed, it was already complete. This is the word of God. Yeah, my understanding. I could be wrong, of course.
That's my position too. I'm saying that when God orders Muhammad to tell the people, I don't find in the revelations given to me any food prohibited for any eater except these 4. That's talking in absolute terms, like Peter said. That's using the double negative. It's using very strong language. It doesn't make any sense. In fact, it's illogical for after such a statement to include broken or incomplete dietary prohibitions. That's why the messenger of the covenant in Appendix 16 rightfully considers 6145 and 146 to be the absolute when it comes to dietary law. He calls it the absolute. Absolute. Absolute means that it covers everything. It's full, it's complete. But people like Fari are asking us to believe that
And
6145, 146
let's
are
not
not.
attack people. Let's talk about the
I'm not
topic.
attacking.
This
I'm just
Quran
addressing
study.
your
This is
position.
a
People that
Quran
hold your
study.
position,
Talk about
right?
the Quran,
People
not
that hold Fari's position are stating that these two verses are not absolute, even though the messenger says it. Now, we have a mechanism to resolve disputes. We have to refer to the messenger. And the messenger spent time and energy writing up an appendix on this topic, Appendix 16. The ultimate verse that he used in Appendix 16 is 6145. So if the conclusion we are to have that all foods can be prohibited, it wouldn't make sense. In fact, it would be contradictory for the messenger to use an incomplete verse on dietary law and refer to it basically as the ultimate reference on dietary law. That doesn't make sense. That's inconsistent. And when we examine further, the messenger of the covenant says in the audio and fixes the whole thing for us. He says, look, dedication means sacrifice. He says, the guy says, another time the guy says, oh, that's a Christian turkey. Rashad says, is it Christian? Did they say the name of Jesus at the time of slaughter when they killed it? No. So it's a submitter. We can eat that turkey. And this is consistent over and over and over again. So when the messenger gives us a clear instruction on this, clear resolution on the dispute, we should just accept that. We shouldn't insist on our personal perceptions, let alone creating this false notion of scripture and attributed to the messenger of God, saying that we have to look at the sequence of the translation and the literal word, and then we take that over the interpretations of the messenger. It destroys the entire paradigm of submission. Everything is crushed. Is somebody trying to speak? Is that Brother Ahmed?
Yes.
Ahmed is.
What,
Did you want to make
Miss
a comment?
Curry, can I ask some question? One question, please. Why God prohibits animal products? Do you know why God prohibits animal products, especially animal products? Because of it's somebody pledge with animals in temples or mosque or some churches. The clashes will be happened. The communal clashes will be happened. So that's what God says: do not eat animal products. This is my opinion.
Yeah, mashallah, thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly before you go, Peter. You guys were talking about I think Fari used this statement on the fact that God forgives all sins, right? This is the same position that I was talking about before, circumscription, which is if I make a term and then I say except, for example, you're not allowed to go outside, full stop. And then later I say except that the house is on fire, right? So the general statement is that you're not allowed to go outside. I make a specific requirement or term whereby if that term is met, then you're not, you're then allowed to go outside. This is what's happening in the reverse, right? This is why it's actually a weak argument to say that there was some form of abrogation or that in fact 115 was superior in some way. 115 from the prohibition sense. So you've got the verse that she put, and then if you look at the other verses that talk about idolatry, 448, God does not forgive idolatry, but he forgives lesser offenses for whomever he wills. 4116, God does not forgive idol worship if maintained until death, and he forgives lesser offenses for whomever he wills. And then it's the general statement, 3953. Proclaim, all my servants, who exceeds the limits. And that's an important thing to see as well. Exceeded the limits, right? Never despair of God's mercy, for God forgives all sins. And again, this is not contradictory. One did not supersede the other. is the specific term that built into the more general term. A direct contradiction would be something like, God does not forgive idolatry. And then in another verse, God says, God does forgive idolatry, right? That would be a contradiction. And therefore, maybe one is abrogating the other. No such thing exists in the Quran.
Mashallah, I agree. Like for the topic of forgiveness, like as you brought up, we have to look at all those verses to really understand the whole topic. And I think the foods thing, in my understanding, is similar. Like there's 6145, it's specifying like running blood, carry on, and it's also bringing out the example of like the animals, which is an important thing that people dedicate to other than God. And then in 16115, my understanding is it has kind of, it generalizes, like it's more general, that it's, it includes all food that's dedicated to other than
The
God.
Arabic expression is the
Um,
same. It's the same Arabic expression in 6145 and 16115.
well, the that in 6115 is referring to food. It's going back to food, and Dr. Khalifa has
No,
translated
it's
as
where are
food.
you getting that? Wait. You're making a linguistic or grammatical argument for 16115. Where's food in the verse to go back to food? There is
It's
no word food in that verse.
right. What I'm saying is it's and that, right? And that which is dedicated.
Ohella itself automatically is sacrifice.
But that no, this is actually a good point she's bringing up. That in 16115 would be animals. Look, carry on, dead animals. What is it? It's animals, right? Blood. What is that from? Animals, right? The meat of pigs. What is that? It's an animal. But then when it comes to the fourth, you're like, no, that's all food. It's inconsistent. Even if we use the good example that Said brought up, right? It says that it's like, look, you're saying that okay, 16115 is the correct one because it's the broader. But then technically, again, if you use that consistent logic, then you should say, okay, all blood is prohibited, all dead animals are prohibited. So you're using inconsistent approach for this.
No, I'm
And
saying we
I
need to
want to
look at
highlight.
all the verses.
I want to highlight. I'm not done. I'm not done. I put a link for all the audios, the videos, and then also the writings from Rashad regarding this matter. Not once does he say that apples, cucumbers, garlic, lentils, any of this stuff can be part of the dietary prohibitions. He actually goes out of his way, and I'm going to share this one audio on this. He explicitly says, he says, look, when it comes to the dietary prohibitions, I limit it to animal products. But when it comes to mentioning God's name before we eat, he opens that up to all food, and he starts specifying them. This includes, cucumbers and carrots and this and that, right? So he's making the specification. He's extrapolating what he means in this. Again, we've yet to see one verse outside of, hey, okay, he changed the translation or faulty logic, to back up that this is actually all food. Because I haven't seen a single verse to support that claim. I haven't seen a single evidence saying that this was what Rashad understood it as. So if you have anything, right, outside of, again, trying to draw like analogies, I would love to see it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist. And actually, the only piece of evidence that she has is looking at a misunderstanding of one verse in isolation. That's it. All the overwhelming evidence from all the other verses and the footnotes and the appendix and the video and the audios all support the position that is limited to animal products. But because she's emphasizing a twisted understanding of one verse in isolation, she's getting the wrong understanding of the Quran.
So
Because there's no other
can I
verse
make
that
it-
can be interpreted this way.
Can I make a comment now? So I just wanted to share that in terms of the, lost my train of thought. Okay. Let's see. So 16, oh yeah, this is what I was gonna say. Okay, 16115, it's and that, if we look at the previous verse, it says, therefore you shall eat from God's provisions everything that is lawful and good, and be appreciative of God's blessings if you do worship him alone. and then he only prohibits. So that's a continuation. He only prohibits for you this, and that is going, in my understanding, is going back to God's provisions, which is all food, and that's my understanding of why it's translated as food. Initially, he had translated as animals, and then he changed it to food. And again, like with the example of the forgiveness as well, in this example, there's different aspects of the topic that may be clarified in different verses. And that's what I'm saying is we need to look at the whole Quran, all the verses. And my last piece that I wanted to share is that it's, you know, it's good for everyone to just study this for themselves and talk to different submitters about their understandings and why they have those understandings. Peace be upon you all, brothers and
Wait,
sisters. May God
Sister
guide
Farah,
us to
before
the
you go,
correct
like,
understanding.
did you, aside for 16115, where you're saying he changed it to food, right? Do you have other references, whether in audio form, footnote, submitter's perspective, Quranic verses that corroborate that position that you're holding? Because that was Peter's question, as I understood it. Did I get that right, Peter?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, our primary source is the Quran, right? That's our source of guidance, law. It's a blessing that God clarified and explained things to us through Dr. Khalifa. And he himself, Dr. Khalifa, this is how he's translated it as food, and he had changed it. So we see how, like, his understanding, and there's other examples where his understanding also grew and he also evolved. I also want to, I just, like I said, I'm usually away from the chat, but I saw this thing about me, like, going against the messenger. I am not. I'm trying
Well,
to,
this is a
I'm
perfect
trying to
opportunity to do that.
follow.
This is a perfect opportunity to go with the messenger. We have a
I'm not
dispute
done
about.
yet, Brother Naveed. I'm not done yet. I'm striving to follow the Quran and the path of all the messengers, and the truth that God has blessed us with through different prophets, messengers, like God's path and submission. I strive to submit to
Yeah,
God, and I'm not
but
questioning or challenging Dr. Khalifa, or
you are
I don't
though. You are
challenge
though because
Dr. Khalifa or
you're
any other
insisting.
messenger.
Yeah, you're
Um,
insisting. Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah,
Sorry,
no, I just
sorry.
want to say that I'm not challenging his
You are.
authority.
You are. And let me tell you. Let
Agreeing
me
with it.
explain to
No,
you. Let me explain to you how you are
be upon
challenging.
you, brothers and sisters.
You are taking your interpretation of a verse over the explanation of the messenger, right?
He's gone
So
anyway.
okay.
But
Well, I'm gonna explain this for everyone else.
just one question, because she's saying 16 was, let's say, abrogating because Rashad changed it to food, right? To whatever the verses prior. But then you have two other chapters that were released sequentially after 16.
Exactly.
173 and 53, which Rashad also explains in Appendix 16, right? So if we're looking at the Quran in succession as a whole, there's 3-1 verses, right, against the position of taking it as food alone. And 2 chapters other than 16 after seem to abrogate that position. So which one
And you
do
know
I
what's
go for?
wild?
Why do I
No.
only go to 16?
And you know what's wild about that is that's one of the last verses revealed as 5:3. It says, "Today I've completed your religion," and it's the same 4 dietary provisions limited to animal products. So the day that Muhammad is told, he's announced, "Today I've completed your religion," it reverts the dietary provisions back to, or states what they are in 6145. That's it. There's no way around this. And then the other point I wanted to, sorry, 1 second, Peter. The other point I wanted to point out why she's not, this is a more fundamental issue. She doesn't accept the authority of the messenger because she's saying if I have an interpretation of verse, that's it. We can't do anything. And I'm saying, no, if we have different interpretations of the verse, we have to refer to the messenger if he's spoken on it to get a result. I put it in the chat, in the audio at minute 7, verse 2nd 59. The messenger says, dedication means I kill this animal in the name of whatever. So that should resolve the dispute and we're finished. Go ahead, Peter. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is just, it's a classic case of taking something that, let's say, anyone reads 16:115, there's some questions, right? Is it all blood? Is it, only blood poured forth? Is it all dead animals? Is it just carry on, right? And she's taking something that is, how do you put it, a little more open-ended to try to define the verses that are more cut dry, right? There is no ambiguity there. And it reminds me similar to the arguments that people make towards like intercession, right? So in the Quran, it's very definitive. There is no intercession. There are no intercessors, period. Then there's these verses where it puts a caveat, except in accordance with God's will, right? Except those who God permits. And then from that, they say, okay, look, then therefore there is intercession. So they'll take something open-ended to try to define something that's more concrete. And that's just it's a wrong approach. And God warns us about this in Surah 3, verse 7. It says, the majority of the Quran is straightforward. It's easy to understand. It's clear. And some of it is multi-meaning. Those who have doubt in their hearts are going to pursue the multiple meaning verses to try to extricate a certain meaning. And when they do that, again, it's showing that they're going against the very system that God has utilized for us to, come to a consensus.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a point. Like, this is bizarre to me, right? I've seen people yield points here, left, right, and center, right? I'm a new submitter, so I've had to yield many points being a Quranist prior. I've yet to see a single instance, not one, where Fari yielded a point, not one, right? Whether it's about the jinn companion, whether it was about insurance, and now about the verses that we talked about, right? At what point do you realize that maybe your ego or your opinion sits above the messenger? Right? This is plain cut to me. If you say, I don't put my opinion above the messenger, but the messenger said these are the only prohibited meats, and he clarifies further what sacrifice means, and all these verses are very clear, then I say, no, these examples don't suit my needs, but this specific one does. Right? At which point are you saying I'm wrong? I've never heard her say that. I don't know. Maybe I'm mistaken. I haven't got the full scope, but that's a sure sign that your ego sits above the truth, right? That you've arrived at an understanding. You're super smart. You're a genius, a physician, whatever the case may be. Therefore, your understanding is absolute. We are bugs, right? Our understanding, the knowledge given to us, are minute. Every level, at every point, there's a chance someone's got a better understanding than you. If you're unwilling, unyielding, then you think you're absolute. That's a position that only God has.
You're absolutely right. I totally agree. And this is not just on this topic. You've seen she has a long history of refusing to be cross-examined, where I love it. I would love to be corrected because that makes me stronger. If I'm going to be in a position where I'm never going to be questioned, never cross-examined, never pointed out or criticized, then how can I improve myself? If I believe my understandings are equivalent to God's always, without any possibility of correction or change, then that's just destroying my ability to grow, to develop. So I thought it's very clear. I mean, so many examples were thrown at her. So many different ways of looking at this were thrown at her. And the messenger clarified. And there's the other verses. I mean, there's just so many ways to slice and dice it. And she does not concede even 1 point. Not even 1 point is being conceded here. Right? And it's not limited to this topic. It goes to the fundamental concept. When we asked her, hey, is insurance prohibited? She refused to say it. But if the messenger tells us it's prohibited, we can just say the messenger said it's prohibited. This should not be controversial. It's not. It's very simple. But for me, this is just, yeah, go ahead, Yvonne.
This may be off topic because I would really like to get back to the study. And if it is, we'll just take it somewhere else. Help me understand why we engage in this when you know that she is totally against what we believe.
Yeah, so I can give you several reasons. Number one, it better solidifies and strengthens the understanding of everyone here. I don't know if there's 50, 60 or whatever people here. Number two, it was relevant to the question that Jamil asked. He's the one that started this conversation, and I actually wanted to go back to Jamil and see where he's at with all of this. And number three, it's just a good exercise. You saw how we kind of had to put our minds together to come up with different analyses of the Quran that I think we may not have covered otherwise. So we engage with what God, puts before us, and just try to deal with it by God's leave. Jamil, did you understand all that? Are you understanding the issue?
Yeah, I'm understanding. So basically, it's saying that it's like clarified with all the footnotes and the other verses and the Rashad messages that it specifically refers to animals being slaughtered, and that the food part was just a continuation of the previous verses specifically.
I think the food concept is just that verse is presented as a general verse. The way the language he's using is using more general language. So instead of saying carry on, he puts running blood, even though the Arabic is the same. Right? Instead of animals slaughtered to idols or dedicated to idols, he says food, which is broader, and the subtitle says food, which is broader. But what's interesting is that in a way, 6145 subtitle is more comprehensive because it says dietary. So that includes drink. In the Quran, food and drink are distinguished. So when the messenger puts the subtitle dietary prohibitions or dietary restrictions at the top of 6145, that means this verse is going to cover everything. There's no way out of it. Yeah,
If
go
I could
ahead.
add something, there's some comments in the chat too. The word that's used in all the four verses regarding dietary prohibition is ohilla. And ohilla, if you look at classical Arabic dictionaries, it's basically invoking the name of an entity during the time of slaughter. This is what the word means. Even if you look at the term muhilla, so it comes from where halal comes from. This is the place by which you slaughter an animal. So the concept of halal and haram, right, in the context of the Quran, is always in the context of strictly just animal products. In that someone has, a basket of carrots, and they say, "Oh, I dedicate this to, some juice, whatever." That's utterly meaningless. It's utterly meaningless. The only thing we're required to do at that point is we say Bismillah, and you can eat it. And God gives us this example. This is Surah 5, verse 103. Surah 5, verse 103. It's really interesting. It says, God did not prohibit livestock that begets certain combinations of males and females. And if you look at the Arabic for 5103, the word that's used for this, these are pagan practices. This one's called baria. And then you have Taiba, right? So basically livestock liberated by an oath. And it continues. God is telling you that despite the pagans saying that these animals are prohibited because of their, pagan beliefs, God is saying that they're lawful. As long as you kill it and you mention God's name and you don't mention other than God, that animal's lawful. If we say that the pagans can make food unlawful, all it's going to take is someone's going to say, I dedicate all this water, all these vegetables, right, to some other entity. And then, we can't eat at a grocery store. We can't eat at a restaurant anymore. God did not make the religion where someone can come and just make our food in our own fridge unlawful.
And this is important because what if someone plants a tree and says, I plant this tree to Jesus? Does that mean the apples from that tree for the next 200 years are all prohibited? It just doesn't make sense. Does that make sense, Jamil?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just as an impartial thing, just to build for Jamil, if possible. I gave the verses, this is from Rashad's translation, to ChatGPT and said, give me an unbiased but precise response. Guess what it came at number 4? Animals dedicated to other than God. Unbiased, by the way. This is just about, you can ask this question any number of times, any number of computers, they will compute the same logic. Anyone with a brain should arrive at this conclusion, my opinion.
Bro,
I actually
are you
remembered.
asking ChatGPT? Come on, man.
Yeah, yes.
Hey,
I did.
guys. Navid, I have a question for you because I've
Is
been
it
waiting for
relevant
you
to
guys
this
to finish.
conversation or no?
No, it's very simple. I just wanted to ask you a simple question real quick because I was waiting here until you guys finished the point, but
Yeah, I
since
just
you don't
had an
want
announcement I
to,
wanted to make. I've been waiting for Brother Iskandar to be here. I did an announcement. So I wanted to say, Brother Iskandar, peace be upon you. Welcome. The announcement was that Brother Iskandar and his community have reached the conclusion that the circumcision is not a mandatory rite of submission. Brother Ibrahim Iskandar, can you speak on this topic in your journey? Peace.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. God bless you all. So we have been thinking that the circumcision was a practice or a duty in submission. However, when we examine the explanation from Messenger of the Covenant in multiple times, he emphasizes that there are only 4 duties or practices of submission. Islam is coming through Abraham. However, circumcision is widely practiced, is a widely practiced practice in Islamic world, in Judaism, even in Christianity. However, Quran doesn't purify it, and the purifying messenger is not purifying this practice. So the question is, where should we place this practice? So the conclusion that we have reached is that this is not a duty or practice. However, this is a sign or a symbol that people can make, can continue or not. So, and this is not a duty on them. This is just a symbol or a sign. And there is a wisdom behind why God did not prohibit to people who are not descendant of Abraham, because there are scientific proves that it is, it has that there are benefits in circumcision according to the CDC reports and other, as a doctor, I can tell you that there are some, benefits behind it. So one can be circumcised as a, as a benefit from medical point of view, or they can continue and they can continue as a religious thing, but it is not mandatory like azan. So praise God, we have come to this conclusion, but I was thinking it must be done. And praise God, I repent to God. So God showed us true way. Praise be to God. That is what I'm telling you. And praise God, when Brother Soner showed this footnote from Messenger of the Covenant to the community, majority of people have accepted.
Praise God. God bless you. Congratulations. This is wonderful news. I'm so happy that we are in contact. You're willing to discuss with us, have a relationship, connect, communicate, and consult. And what I notice is that every day that goes by, God is bringing us closer and closer together. So this is a wonderful blessing from God, and I really appreciate that. I do believe the sincere believers will converge on the main overall larger understandings. So this is fantastic news. Also, congratulations on the Turkish Turkish annual conference. So this is wonderful. I'm really happy for the progress you're making.
What was the conclusion about circumcision? I didn't get it.
There's not so I put the footnote in the chat. The messenger says, the Quran repeatedly informs us that submission is the religion of Abraham. And he gives 4 verses. Then he says, Abraham received a practical scripture, namely all the duties and practices of submission. And then in parentheses, he puts the contact prayers, the obligatory charity, the fasting of Ramadan, and the Hajj pilgrimage. So these are the 4 duties that Abraham received for submission, and they do not include circumcision. So that's not a rite of circumcision. It's not part of
Yeah.
what we are supposed to uphold as the religion of Abraham.
Navid, and we cannot contradict with messenger. So when God's messenger say all practices and duties are these 4, we cannot say another thing is duty or practice. So I believe these was given to Abraham descendant, Abraham lineage. However, other people wanted to practice it, and God did not prohibit that. So if anybody wants to continue, this is not prohibited. But this we cannot say it is a duty or it is a practice. Otherwise, we would contradict with the messenger.
Correct.
I want
God
to
bless
ask
you.
something, inshallah, peace be upon you all. In Quran study 41 or 44, I'm not sure I can find it. Master of Covenant said God created everything in exact measure, including our bodies. So this is also support that argument. I don't see it as a mandatory practice in submission. In fact, we have different discussions and verses also that God created everything in perfect measure.
Actually, I believe this is not a valid point. I kind of disagree with this point of view because when we born, we are born with the how can I say, we born with the placental. There is a tube that is connecting us to the placenta of our moms. So we born with that. So we exactly born with that, and it is being cut. So that there are some other examples with that. So I don't believe we can give this an example to this point. I don't believe this is a relevant example.
We are not talking about the during pregnancy period, or we are talking about the human being that God created everything in exact measure. And the Master of Covenant says, including our bodies. So this is what I wanted to mention. It's very relevant in my opinion. Billions of males that we have here, some are choose not to circumcise or anything. In fact, there are also some scientific information also to support it. But at the end of the day, what we all agree is that it's not mandatory in submission. This is the important point.
Yeah, if we go to one extreme, we say that it's a satanic. I think we're making an error. If you go to the other extreme and say that it's mandatory, not a submitter unless you circumcise, that's also an error. It's not addressed directly in the Quran, so we just we don't over extrapolate or make faulty conclusions from it.
So do you think?
Navid,
So
can I ask
do
you?
you think all the? Sorry. Do you think all of the Genesis, all the stuff about circumcision and Abraham in Genesis is incorrect?
Me personally, no. I just it again has to do with what is our obligation. Is it incumbent upon a submitter to be circumcised? I can make an argument for it, right? But I can't say definitively, right? And similarly, if someone says, "Hey, it's a satanic innovation," that's a huge, high bar to make such a claim. I think because of that, you just accept that it's like, okay, it's not part of it's not a mandatory, decree for submitters. We can't say that it's a satanic innovation or anything like that, or that it's faulty. Just that, okay, this was for that time and place.
Yeah, I accept that. What I'm trying to get at is, do we think that the Bible is made up? Like, is that all made up? And probably is
I
not
wouldn't
real.
go there just because. Yeah, it's like, look, there's over 50 different instances in over a dozen books where it mentions the concept of circumcision. The only time that you see pushback towards it is in the writings of Paul, and the only reason is he says that you're a fool to basically uphold to do it and then be responsible for the law. So we don't have a single account of a prophet, a messenger coming and saying that, hey, this is a fabrication, it's satanic, or something that impacted so many billions of people. If this was a innovation of that magnitude, you'd expect clarification from one of God's messengers throughout all of history. A reasonable take, nothing too outlandish.
Yeah, I think if you don't do circumcision by the 8th day, you never do it, unless it's a medical situation.
I feel bad. I know some people they've converted and like adults they got circumcised. And I just to me I would never never tell someone, hey, you want to come to be a submitter? That's the requirement. I would never. Does anyone
Agreed.
else have any other comments either about this or dietary prohibitions or Surah 15 that we read? Want to bring up?
Yeah, on the dietary thing, I just wanted to bring up Surah 16, verse 115, that the word was not changed from animal to food. It was the word that to food.
That's a good observation. It's funny. I just like it dawned on me. I was listening to this Christian polemics, and he was arguing against the Quran. And what he was doing is he was taking these kind of more open verses to have far reaching kind of like extrapolations from it. And he does the same thing like with the Bible. They'll take one passage that's kind of ambiguous, and they'll extrapolate the entire Christian Unitarian theology from it. And this is very much kind of what God warns about in Surah 3, verse 7, that it says, do not take basically the allegorical verses or the ones that could be interpreted in multiple ways over the clear-cut verses of the Quran. And when people do that, they're pretty much like begging to to come up with contradictions. And then, funny enough, there was this video, like literally as I'm having this idea, the next video that pops up on my feed is this. It was Rabbi Toby Singer, and someone was asking him. They're saying, "Hey, Abraham had to sacrifice his son, and because of that, this means that Jesus was, to be sacrificed as God's son for, the sins of humanity." And he was just saying like how this is just terrible logic because you're making all these inferences. And the guy used this expression, "I'm painting a picture." He's like, "Well, why don't you just use the clear verses of the, in their case, the Tanakh, to show that God will never kill an innocent person for the sins of a wicked. That this just it breaks the clear commandments in the Bible if you take that level of extrapolation."
Yeah, I have one more thing, Peter. I was wondering if you could address or take a look at this. So the 6:145 verses 16:115. So 6:145, God is addressing the believers because it says say. But 16:115 is not a say verse. It's kind of giving a history of this incident, whatever, where prohibiting lawful food brings deprivation. It's kind of it's different, right?
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I do see
right?
it now that you pointed out.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
Yeah, and
Just a statement
one
of
other
fact.
thing, so the word that is a word that takes from what's been mentioned previously and puts it into a set, right? So it's clearly talking about meat because the word that is there. And then I think another interesting thing about the word meat is that meat is a word that was used in Old English that meant all food. Like let us eat meat meant all food. And then Rashad changes that to food, is kind of the same thing, right?
Interesting.
It's
I was gonna
food,
say.
but it's food referring to the subset from before, which is meat.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, to me, it's what's interesting is none of the 4 dietary prohibitions actually say, livestock, but the reality is, carry on. You don't have an orange that's carry on, right? You don't have,
Right.
an orange that has like blood. Like it's starting with that subset. And so if it's saying in that which, you would say, okay, well, what's the subset that they're in reference to? And it's livestock. I think part of the issue is just two things. One is, obviously we want to avoid all forms of idol worship, but the interesting piece is Satan's always going to push people to an extreme, right? Meaning God sets the limits. He says, okay, this is what's permissible, this is what's not permissible. But Satan wants to say, okay, let's be more righteous. Let's go beyond those bounds, as if that's going to make God happier by prohibiting more things, and that's really what 61:12 through 119 is referencing. In 112, it says God cites the example of a community that used to be secure and prosperous, with provisions coming to it from everywhere. But then it turned unappreciative of God's blessings. Consequently, God caused them to taste the hardships of starvation and insecurity, such as the requital for what they did. And if you read the subtitle, it says prohibiting lawful food brings deprivation. And it's not a surprise that, yeah, the countries that typically have a lot of these dietary prohibitions, um, more often than not, they do end up becoming, suffering from deprivation. It's not always the case, but there is a correlation that we're able to observe through that. It's similar to the children of Israel. God gave them a set of prohibitions, and they extrapolated beyond what was prohibited. If you read, like, is it 6146?
Salam alaikum.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum.
Getting back to the topic of circumcision. I was reading that among the quote unquote the Jewish religion, male infants are traditionally circumcised on their 8th day of life. And the article that I'm reading on the internet says the justification in the Jewish holy book, the Torah, is that a covenant was made between Abraham and God, and on, so on. And it references Genesis 17 to 10. And it says, the Torah states, quote, "This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and thy seed after thee. Every male among you shall be circumcised." Genesis 17:10. Male circumcision continues to be almost universally practiced among Jewish people. And I simply wanted to cite that. I grew up, my parents, my lineage, my relatives, I grew up in a Christian society, and my family practiced it because they believed that this was part of what God had commanded. This is notwithstanding the fact that there, as my brother, I can't pronounce the name, Iski, my brother physician just stated a few moments
Iskandar.
ago. Yeah. Oh, thank you. That there can be health benefits, but it is certainly not a command from God. It was just, I was curious as to, does anyone know anything about whether or not this in fact is true? I don't know enough about the Torah to make an informed comment regarding whether or not this in fact is true about the circumcision and related to the covenant between Abraham and God. Thank you. Just a comment.
There's a lot of a connection between the covenant of circumcision, Abraham, and even there is hints of it in the Quran, where if you read into some of the stuff, but it's not it's not clear in the sense where, when it talks about salat, there's no ambiguity, right? We're not making a broad sweeping guess that, oh, does God want us to do salat or not, right? And that's kind of, to me, it's telling, where even though that there are these, how do you put it, like kind of indirect, possible, I don't want to say definitive, but possible callbacks to it, that it's never directly commanded to the believers. But for all intents and purposes, for my studies and stuff, I have no reason to think that this wasn't a practice that was originally commissioned by God. Um, and for us, the fact that the Quran doesn't talk about it directly, it's like I don't think it helps do too much speculation, because if we're wrong, we could be attributing lies. We don't gain much for speculation. All we can say is like, okay, this is what we know, this is what we don't know.
Thank you. Shukran. Thank you. Peace.
Emil, is there any other topic that was wanted to bring up while you got everyone on?
I mean, no, not really.
There was an interesting observation talking about the Bible versus the Quran. You look at the I'll put it in the chat. So God in the Quran says that the Moses was given 9 miracles, and from my understanding, I'm putting the 9 as I understand it. He had a staff that turned into a serpent. His hand turned white, without a blemish. Drought and shortage of crops. Flood, locusts, lice, frogs, blood, and the parting of the sea. So that's 9 miracles. One of them that's very glaringly missing from the Quran, that is in the Bible, is the death of the firstborn of Pharaoh. And what's interesting about that, so this is the Bible doesn't give a definitive count, and some of them you can say maybe they're just kind of extrapolations from 9 that are mentioned in the Quran. This one is just fundamentally different. Like there's no way to say that, oh, the Quran is indirectly either happened or it didn't. And what's interesting about this one, where it says that Pharaoh had his firstborn killed, or basically the Egyptians did, and then they passed over the children of Israel, is that this actually contradicts a lot of verses in the Old Testament, which is very glaring. I'm going to put some of them in here because, again, this doesn't align with God's system, right? That He's going to go and kill the firstborn of the Egyptians. So it reads, this is Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy 24, 16. It says, parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children be put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. Ezekiel 18:20. And if you read all of Ezekiel 18, the whole concept is no one's going to pay for the sins of someone else. Each person is going to be responsible for their own sins. And it actually uses the metaphor of a father and a son, which is just a refutation to the concept you find in Christianity. In Jeremiah 31:29 and 30, and then 2 Kings 14:6, both times it cites Deuteronomy 24:16. It's interesting that the Quran doesn't address this thing that they consider the most holy day, in a Jewish celebration, Passover. That for all intents and purposes, it's very possible that this was something that was fabricated and inserted inside their scripture. The article too, if you guys. Anyone else have any other topics or comments you wanted to chime in on? Amadeus, you got?
Yes, Salam. I would like to just propose a comment. It's about circumcision. I just would like to say that as we know that man has other obligation, has other responsibility in submitting in a religion of God, and some of them are not properly on the scripted, are not written properly as the fact that the salat and the Jumu'ah must be done by men only if you have to lead them. So I'm asking, is it possible that the circumcision has the same attribute? It's something so much understood and well applied, sorry. And so it could be just, a good practice, as the fact that everybody knows that man has some responsibility in the religion of God that woman hasn't. Thank you.
I mean, to me, if someone believes that, hey, this is a thing, if they have a son, they want to circumcise, I wouldn't tell them, oh, you can't or no. I think it's something that, because it's not directly addressed in the Quran, that people just use their, discretion. I think the boundaries that, at least what I feel comfortable is saying, like, look, someone says it's satanic innovation, they've gone too far. If someone else comes and says it's absolutely mandatory, like you're not a submitter unless you do this, they've gone too far. So I mean, if you think that this is incumbent and you have a son, and you want to wish to have them circumcised, I think it's a personal decision. I don't know what other people think regarding this matter.
What if the child grows up and say, let's say, is not a believer, say, hey, Dad, why did you do that to me? I didn't give you my consent.
There's this there's a guy, he's Indian. He was suing his parents for basically not getting his consent when he was conceived. Uh I mean, he meant it. He's actually part of a movement. They believe that, human beings are a cancer on the earth and you shouldn't populate and this and that. But, to me, the reality is like, no, parents make decisions for their children. And they do basically the things that are, one is to believe is for the child's best interest. My kids might say, hey, why did you send me to that school? Why did you have me study this? Why didn't you have me study that? Like, well, look, I have to make these decisions on your behalf as your guardian, as your parent, right? And I'm going to make the best decision that I would want to apply, I wish someone did for myself. So I think, that kind of an argumentation, to me, honestly, I know just as many people, or the ones, and again, like, look, for people who weren't, who wish that their parents did, as the few who basically did and wish that their parents didn't. So it can go either way.
It's up to the person, up to the parents to decide. And so I think it's fine. Any individuals want to make that decision as long as they don't attribute it to the religion.
I just wanted to make a quick distinction on that. So, for example, I'm not going to say circumcision is satanic because, as we talked, there can be a lot of benefits. There's a lot of history. There's many reasons non-religious to do it. However, I would say, for example, FGM, female genital mutilation, that is satanic. It has zero health benefits. It's oppression of women. It has no basis, no precedent, no medical significance. It's just a satanic act that is abusing these women and disabling their ability to have a meaningful interaction. So we have to make a distinction between something that is truly satanic. So I do recognize that personally. That's how I see it.
But the one thing, to be honest, whenever this conversation come up, I did at age 28. To be honest, I really suffered for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks. At that time, I said, no, this is a covenant by Abraham. I have to do it. At the age of 28, I suffered a lot, man. 2 weeks.
Well, I think this is why.
Now I know Raju's pain.
Yeah, this is why, probably part of why the messenger just never, it's not a right of Abraham. So he didn't say, hey, oh, you're a submitter now? Okay, you should go get circumcised. We just don't have any evidence of that. But we have people that were non-Muslim and non-submitters join submission, but he never told them. And I was going to point out this why, even in the video Essentials of Submission, this is not referenced. So this is not part of the rights of submission.
They're not going to ask, are you a submitter? Show us the proof.
Salam alaikum. I just like to put on the table, so to speak, that if this is not a right of a submission given to Abraham, then it would highly suggest to me that references in the Torah and what have you, early scriptures, that this is a covenant or right are false. They are not true. Again, I'm just simply saying, to me, it suggests that that's actually not true. Again, God knows, of course, what's best. It's not a right of submission. It's not a right of the worship of the one God, the covenant to worship the one God.
There is one other possibility that I considered, is that the Quran says that Abraham was put to the test through certain commands. Is it reasonable to say that this was one of those commands? So it's not a right of submission, but he was required to do certain things for that time as a test. He says he was put to the test through certain commands. So maybe circumcision is one of those commands, and he just did it. But that doesn't make it a right of submission of the monastic, of the rights of the religion that are part of Millet Ibrahim that's passed down for us to uphold.
One way of just thinking about it too is that it might just be for the children of Israel, right? It is a possibility in that sense. But the reality is just that the Quran doesn't directly say it is or isn't, or we're responsible for it. We don't want to extrapolate beyond. That's the whole point. So I can't say that it's like, oh, it's a fabrication, this and that, because it's so heavily kind of infused in all the various books of the Old Testament and the New Testament, that if this was a satanic innovation, if it had no basis, you think for sure one of the prophets and messengers verified that message.
What is your, do you think we can relate anyway what the messenger said? I shared the audio that it says God created everything in exact measure, including our bodies and so on. Do you think somehow we can relate that to this, or?
If I could just say one thing, it's like, look, a baby's born, and we give it vaccines. So that's a violation of the quote unquote exact measure. We're adding to that measure. If you want to take it literally like that, okay, well, hey, the baby's born, here's measles, here's hepatitis shots, here's whatever. And
that's different. This is kind of a body, at the end of this, like body modification, right? Like we have to remove that part of the flesh. So I think it's different than vaccine.
But the vaccines have permanent change on your, I guess, genetic makeup or your bodily existence, especially these, these one-time, lifelong vaccines, right? We're not talking about the flu shot that's like seasonal. You take this shot for the rest of your life or whatever, or with smallpox or measles or mumps or hepatitis or these kind of things.
Short conversation with an expert about vaccine. He said it's not like that what people think. It's a lifetime, it will affect your body and stuff. There is no clear study about that changes what you say. And in fact, when it's come apart from that, when it comes to for viruses and all, it said it's completely changing. No matter what vaccine you do, there will be new mutation and new stuff. But in terms of remaining or changing a major change in our genes and all, I don't think there is much evidence for that.
I think it's just not.
Regardless,
Yeah, I just don't think it's
I think it's up
important
to
enough.
the
Yeah.
I think it's up to the person, if they want to do it for health benefits, because there is, I think, quite enough scientific evidence in terms of benefits of circumcision and so on. But for me, as long as they
Little
don't
to none.
attribute it to the religion as a mandatory practice, as some of the submitters, they did, I'm fine. As long as they don't attribute that this is mandatory, in submission, I'm fine with that.
Peace be upon you, Elham. We had been waiting for you at a turn a couple hours ago or an hour ago. Did you want to take the opportunity to talk about any of these topics? I know Fari's gone now, so you can't address it directly. I'm
Yeah.
sorry if you missed out on that.
Yeah.
But any
That's
updates,
okay. I
any of
was
these
a little tied up
topics,
too.
please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was a little bit tied up too. I apologize. Yeah, no, just on the topic. I mean, I strongly disagree with Fari's approach, like with regards to them works and teachings, audios, and things like this. I don't understand this thing. We go by some videos or some videos and just authorized English version. Like I hear this in the community often, and it seems like there's no like universal consensus thing. Some people say, well, just as translation, the footnotes too, maybe the appendices. Some say no to
Brother, you're
those.
cutting out.
Some
Can you
say for
fix
us
your
videos.
reception? Can you fix your reception? We're just losing you. I really
I
want
think
to
Yep.
it's
hear
you,
what you
bro.
have to
Yeah.
say.
It sounded fine.
How
It
about
sounded
now?
fine
How
to the
about
rest of
now?
us. Elham, you sound
Oh,
good.
okay.
Navid, I think it's on your end, brother.
Oh, praise
Oh,
God.
okay. Does
Okay.
anyone else not hear Elham cutting out? Is it just me then?
Sounded fine.
Nah, he was cutting up a little bit.
Okay. How about everything good now? Navid, you good now? You hear
Yes,
me?
you sound very clear now.
Yeah, okay,
All right,
okay.
fantastic. Yeah, no, I hear this a lot in the community, and there's no real consensus. You know what I mean? Like amongst submitters, it just seems like arbitrary definitions of like what do we accept from the messenger, what is actually his teaching, and some people just reject them altogether, and they just say, well, he was just a smart guy who gave good advice on these topics, but we have to come to our own conclusions and things like that. I didn't agree with that. And I know this has been an ongoing topic with Fari. And what I kept hearing was she didn't like that she couldn't give out her thoughts completely. But on a platform this large with this many people, for it to happen frequently, like every like a lot of Sundays in a row, and God bless Fari, but sometimes her comments are very long and explained. And with a large group like this, you can't need like a faster dynamic. You know what I mean? It's just otherwise people start to lose interest. It becomes very, monotonous. It's like a monologue. And we've actually offered to myself, Alethea, and a couple, and Sidra. We've reached out to her and said, hey, like if you want to talk about these things and be well heard, like we're more than happy to have this conversation with you. We've invited her. We've said, please, like you can then in that setting, in that environment, you're welcome to speak as long as you want, as much as you want. Say, however, you get your turn to speak, and we can have a conversation. Unfortunately, she's declined. She says to her schedule. But I guess on the Sundays she has time, maybe, but I so just wanted to kind of throw that out there because I know in the past some people have kind of said we're cutting her off too much or we're being mean, but we would try to give every submitter like any opportunity we can, and if a certain a situation doesn't work out, we think, okay, well, what kind of environment can we provide for them? How else can we help them out and give them an opportunity to be heard and talk and all this kind of stuff. So just for everybody's information, we do go to those type of lengths. But yeah, I mean, it's really simple, right? Like as a submitter, we're supposed to accept anything from God, right? And that includes the information that God delivers to us through his messengers, 42:51. I've said this a lot, I've used this verse numerous times. It's how God communicates with us. So if God is communicating with us through his messenger,
we simply accept it, regardless, as long as we can verify, hey, he actually said this. I mean, if I bring you a piece of paper and I read at the bottom, signed Rashad Khalifa, and they say, hey, by the way, look what Rashad said, and it's like, okay, buddy, like this is clearly bogus, or we can't verify any of this, then you're not obligated to accept any of it. But I mean, if you know for a fact it's from Rashad, he said this, it's a video, you're watching, or whatever medium that is, right? We do have to accept it. And unfortunately, this gets compared to hadith. But I mean, we have no verification method whatsoever to know if Muhammad said those things. I don't want to draw this out too long. Just my quick comments on this. Thank you.
No, God bless you. And I think this system allowed for the Turkish community to come around on the circumcision issue, because we showed them, hey, I said, hey, look at the footnote of 2135. This is all the duties of the submission are these. Well, hey, it has the 4 duties that we're aware of. And that's it. They said, okay, I'm not going to put we're not going to put our belief, our opinion above the messenger. It's finished. Done. It really is an amazing system if we utilize the system God put for us of referring to the messenger to settle disputes. It is fantastic. Honestly, it works wonders. It's so beautiful. But if we reject this paradigm, then we have all kinds of problems. Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, look, we've talked amongst ourselves on this, right? And we said, like, listen, as long as we have the fundamentals down, we say, okay, we accept the Quran, God is one, we accept his messengers, and we accept that we have to, according to the Quran, not my opinion, we have to accept information brought to us from the messengers. As long as we agree on that, and that's our like fundamental principle here, that it's okay if we disagree on circumcision or dietary prohibitions or any other topic for any number period of time. Like some things like take a while to kind of for people to come around. The circumcision one is one example, right? Like it's been several years, and we've never called the Turkish community kafirs, disbelievers, hypocrites, enemies of God. We don't have to, right? Like it's not okay. We see it differently, but at least we agree on the same principles. It's just one group thought, okay, this is what God and his messenger are telling us. Another group says, no, we think this is what God and his messenger are telling us. But we work it out. We talk about it, and eventually God guides us. And in the meantime, we strive together. We help each other. We said we try to, anytime we get Turkish submitters, we try to send them, to that group. Or if we need assistance, like, hey, we got this guy on VC. He doesn't speak good English. Can somebody from the Turkish community come? So we're helping and we're supporting each other, even though we disagree, right? We're still trying to strive in the cause of God together. That's really like, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's how it should be, and that's what it should come down to, God willing.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that even with this method, it's not like we're going to be in perpetual gridlock. Over and over on multiple topics, without force, without coercion, without intimidation, we've ended up with the same conclusion. I see that as a blessing from God, right? If you're able to get a large group of people to use their own faculties and reach the same conclusions independently with the resources provided, that's a major, major success story. I really appreciate that. Because it's one thing if I say, hey, if you don't agree like I do, I'm just going to ban you from the server. You're not allowed to be here. Or if you don't agree with us, then we're just going to remove, or we're going to tell everybody that you're bad, or use severe social pressure or coercion or cult tactics, manipulation, these kinds of things. But if the focus is, hey, these are the arguments, these are the verses, and we're all striving in the cause of God, it's God's promise. He says, those who strive in my cause, we will guide them on our path. And so as long as the Turkish community's heart was open, we consistently and repeatedly ended up with the same outcome. No force, no obligation. There's no dependency. We're not dependent on each other. We're mutually exclusive entities. But we believe that God is guiding us independently to reach good conclusions that are coherent, consistent, logical, reasonable, Quranic, and with basis. This is a tremendous blessing I'm very grateful for. Because we've seen in other communities, it's just force. You know, if you don't agree with us, we're just going to completely isolate ourselves, block off everything. This is a public server. Recently, we reached over 5,000 members. And this is a very large Quran study. And to get people to voluntarily agree on common principles, ideas, and positions is an amazing blessing from God. I'm very thankful. That's how I see it.
Wait, only 5,000 members? That seems to pale in comparison to the population of multiple religions.
Well, keep in mind, in the first couple of years of Prophet Muhammad, I think he only had a handful, less than 10 or a dozen followers. So we got more people converting on here in 2.5 years than probably Muhammad did in his first 2.5 years. So, you know, we live in a digital time, technologically advanced era where things can go viral pretty quickly. And we've been getting close to getting people that are viral or social media influencers or whatever, close to embracing submission or at least spreading our materials. So it's not far off. It's not, you know, we had a lady with almost 300,000 followers. She's a submitter, but she's not fully on board with helping us, whatever. But let's just say hypothetically she was, and she blasts this out.
300,000 followers?
Yeah, and then let's say out of her 300,000 followers, 50 influential people share it. You know, the whole concept of 5 degrees of separation or whatever. It's like, it's not far-fetched to imagine someone like Elon Musk or another famous person, just the message of submission resonates with them and they just drop it. And fundamentally, things can change. We've seen now, for example, in the United States, how dramatically public view on things can change. Right? So,
I mean, who is the current most famous submitter?
that would in English, in Turkish, it would be Brother Iskandar because he has millions of views on TikTok. But in English, publicly visible, I would say, other than Rashad, it would be Brother Sajjad, who I think has at least a couple million views
Brother who?
on TikTok. Sajjad?
What, on YouTube?
He's on TikTok.
TikTok, what's his channel name?
Sajjad the Submitter. Yeah. So if you go on my TikTok channel, you'll see his videos. But the point I'm trying to make is that it can go viral very quickly, very easily. So we shouldn't be concerned if it's trickling in right now. What we need to focus on is establishing the infrastructure and foundation and understandings and knowledge base here. So we are prepared for such a severe intake. And honestly, I'm not sure sometimes if we are, because I'm busy with some things and I just need more submitters to help me on VC to give the message to people that are not fighting us. They're just eagerly trying to learn about the message. That's why I want to reiterate this opportunity. If you're interested in preaching the message, not as a debate, we have the debater role. If you want to sign up for debater role, you can. We can give you that role to be paying for debates. But separate from that, people that are not even coming in hostile and just are genuinely interested in submission, you like the teacher role, we can appoint that role for you as well. Right? To get the teacher role, so to be tagged if someone is genuinely just coming, look, I just want to learn about submission. We had a brother this week, he says, I just want to know, is code 19 true? And if it is, then submission is true. And that's it. So we need to join together to collaborate and be able to establish this foundation. That's why it's so important, I emphasize, the submitters help in the voice channel here on VC1 to give the message, especially to new people when they're coming and genuinely inquiring about submission from our various media sources that we put out. Go ahead, Jamil.
Hold on. What about specifically on YouTube though? Because TikTok, that one's kind of hard to like. I mean, TikTok, you can only make like 1 minute, 3 minute videos. I mean, you can't really get too elaborate on TikTok. But so, what about YouTube specifically?
Yeah, on YouTube we have the documentary on Code 19. Have you watched that?
I've heard of that. Where's the Who's the
Yeah,
guy?
you should watch that. If someone can share the documentary in VC1 chat.
I mean, I was referring to the creators though, not in their individual videos.
Yeah, well, the Quranic Labs is one. Saeed has videos. Jonathan, Hadith Critic, has videos. Peter is creating videos on the Quran Talk podcast videos, at least at minimum once a month. He's putting out 1 or 2 episodes. So that's a big chunk of people that coming in here are from the Quran Talk podcast on YouTube.